minutes of November 16th, but I don't see them right here. I think I read them. Have you all seen them?
I had comments to go on them regarding the Summer Street project. I never got those comments to her.
Do you want to add those, or?
Yeah, I'd still like to add them, but maybe we could. I mean, we could issue them if you want to get them issued now, or if you want to, if you could wait another till the next session.
If that's all right with the rest of the board, we'll take that up at the next session.
That sounds okay to me.
All right. So we'll go to the next item on the agenda, Form A applications. And we have one. I can find it. And you've all received the plans, and it's on the one that's on it's from the Point, Glenville Point, 245 Central Street, and it's for a project on Linwood Street that you have the plans on. Any comments or on those plans?
I have a couple of questions. Is the person here?
Sean probably is here to answer that. Thank you, Sean.
I guess my question is, I know we all that's before us is splitting the lot into three. There's no structure, building, development, subdevelopment in front of us right now. That the parcels, I think, meet all of the dimensional requirements. My question is, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to be 3 houses built here, and you're adding 3 houses, 3 driveways to a dangerous intersection. How do we take into consideration it's on a corner, that the middle lot's on a corner, so that, you know, how do we measure the dimension for that corner lot?
I mean, as far as the driveway goes?
Well, I mean, we're not here to worry about the dimensions of the driveway, but more the dimensions of the lot. How do you calculate that if it's on a corner?
The lot conforms. The engineers from SEA drew it, so you're right. All 3 lots conform as buildable lots. What it gets proposed to be built on there is a later date. This is just for the sign off on the Form A plan. So I can't speak to where the driveway would be located. The owner of the property is building a new house. She's ripping down her current house and building a new house on one of those 3 lots. But that's the extent of, I know of her plans. There'll be 2 single families on the other lots, but I don't know any designs yet.
And just to correct one thing, it's making 1 lot into 4 lots.
There's a 4th parcel A of backland that's non-buildable, right? But there's only 3 buildable lots with Form A for the Form A plan.
And they all have the proper frontage. It's actually
Correct.
a plan that it's a misconception all the time on these types of plans, is the fact that the planning board is approving something. Basically, all the planning board is saying is that the plan does not come under subdivision control laws. So therefore, it is not a subdivision. So we're not approving anything. We're allowing them to go before, to take the plan to the registry of deeds and record them.
That's right.
So Sean, on lot 2, before the bend in the road starts in the plan, there's more than 100 feet of frontage?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Rick, I don't have the plan in front of me, but I did go over that with the engineer to make sure that it does conform. And the plan, I believe, was submitted and reviewed. I can see Liz is getting on video now. It was submitted to the planning board office, which means it's usually also reported by the town's and reviewed by the town's engineer.
It does not get reviewed by the town's engineer. The board has never required that, so there's no fee for an engineer to review it prior to the meeting.
Excellent. So it's just, we're relying on the on SEA engineering who has submitted that. And I do believe myself as a land use attorney that it does conform.
On lot 2, it has 154. And it does go right to the middle, basically, up there, on the circumference on the two roads.
And Rick, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for being vague, but if there is an issue, obviously the zoning enforcement officer would pick that up if there was a building permit applied for, but we don't believe there is any issue that all 3 lots conform, have sufficient frontage and sufficient lot size.
Okay.
We'll make the motion. Approval not required.
Motion made,
Second,
motion seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
now this is on both of them, Mr. Chair?
This is on just this one on Groveland Street and Linwood Street on that corner. That's the only thing we're.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
So on the motion, all those in favor, we said aye. Anyone opposed? And there were no opposed. Thank you. So moved. You have the approval of the 2021 meeting schedule?
Wayne,
Yes.
you have a
another-
second Form A for 103
Okay.
Central Street.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Form A on 103 Central Street. would be next. And you have that information in front of you. As you recall, that's the land that we've there's 3 houses on it presently. And we talked about this before, and so it's a confusing plan, but I think if you look it over, you can see what's being done.
So is there someone on that can explain this, just to make sure I understand what's happening here?
Yeah, I'm here for you.
All right. So parcel A is being given from lot 2 to lot 1, is that correct?
Correct?
Parcel B is being given from lot 2 to lot 3,
Correct?
and parcel 2 is receiving parcel B.
Parcel 2 is receiving parcel C. I mean, lot 2 is receiving parcel C.
Parcel C, okay. Is there a reason for the swap?
Yeah, we were informed of a zoning issue with the driveway needing to be 3 feet from the side lot line of lot 2. So we're getting that land from lot 2 to satisfy that and giving an equal amount of land in the back corner to the neighbor so that he ends up with the same square footage.
Okay. All right.
Are there any other questions?
No,
Motion will be in order.
I'll make a
No.
motion.
Second,
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous. So moved.
Thank you.
Correspondence, we did, and you've got it in your file, but perhaps for those that are listening, we did receive an email from John Stone, Director of the Department of Public Works, that they will be doing, replacing the streetlights all around town, no cost to the town, and that that'll be done over the next few months by National Grid at their cost. So there'll be all new street lights that'll be LEDs. Any comment?
Just want to comment, Mr. Chair, that I think this is a tremendous thing, and, really thank National Grid and John Stone for doing this. The street lights will be better. I saw the email, and it's going to be a tremendous cost savings to the town. And so many of the towns around us have already done this, so it'll bring Abington into conformance with what other towns have done. So I think it's a wonderful. My house is all LEDs, by this point, but I think it's just great for public safety and everything else. I'm sure Chief Nuttall and Chief Wojcinski and other people would say the same thing. It'll make the town a lot safer place for all of us.
All right, fine, thank you. Any other comments? We'll move to the public hearing on the special permit, site plan review, 286 Spruce Street. Sean, are you going to handle that?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we start, there is a participant, I'm not sure if he's dialed in yet, but he left me a voicemail that he'd like to speak on this at the end of the presentation. I just wanted to make sure that he would be heard. His name is Kevin Keating, so when it's time to take public comment, if you could hear him.
And I'm sure I have a notice here somewhere to read. The Abington Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 4th, 2021 at 6:05 p.m. via Zoom. The link to the meeting will be provided on a posted agenda on the application of Abington Investments LLC, 245 Central Street, Abington, Mass. 02351. The site plan approval pursuant to Abington zoning bylaws 175-77 and the special permit application pursuant to zoning bylaw 175-29 to exceed the maximum lot coverage in the R20 district to construct an 8-unit residential building. The property is owned by Glenna LaPointe, 245 Central Street, Abington, Massachusetts, 02351. The property is located at 286 Spruce Street and located on Assessors Map 61, Lot 7. Plans can be viewed at the Town Clerk's Office, Wayne P. Smith, Chairman, advertised December 21st and December 28th. And perhaps to open up with Mr. Riley on the project.
Okay, sorry about that, trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you can't, if you mute yourself, you have to ask to be unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tachi.
You're welcome, sir.
For the record, my name is Attorney Sean Riley with an office at 500 Washington Street in Abington Center. The reason I'm wearing a mask is because Glenn LaPointe Jr. and Glenn LaPointe Sr. are here in the same room with me. I hope you'll bear with me, and if you have any trouble hearing me, just let me know. Also with us tonight via Zoom is Eric Diaz, our professional engineer from Strong Point Engineering. And I know the town's engineer, David Johnson, is also on regarding this hearing. As Mr. Smith read, this is a site plan approval meeting and a special permit hearing for 286 Spruce Street in Abington. If the board doesn't mind, I'd like to share some of the plans so that everyone can view and see what it is we're talking about. I hope I have the authority to do that. And if so, yeah, and I apologize, this is new for all of us. This is a copy of the face page of the site plan package that was submitted by Strong Point Engineering. It's a 9-page sheet that we can go over in detail, that showing an overview of the assessor's plan and an outline of the parcel, that showing the existing conditions and topography, this sheet showing the proposed layout, this sheet showing some more of the utility plan, drainage issues, this one showing some landscaping, and again, we'll go back in a lot of detail with these, and then proposed erosion control and details of construction that are required by the site plan approval bylaw. This 9-page plan, we submitted 18 copies of this to the planning board for distribution to other town departments and to the town's review engineer. This here is a copy of the assessor's plan, so we can kind of focus on what we're talking about. This is Spruce Street down on the bottom heading towards Rockland. This is the town of Rockland. This is the property that is now owned by LaPointe's. This is the airbase land or Union Point land out back. And this right here, for reference, it's called Roslyn Street on this old map. It doesn't exist. It's called a paper street. I know the board's familiar with it, but it's basically a 34-foot wide strip of land that was set aside as a proposed street literally about a century ago, but it was never constructed, but it's still shown on a plan. And when the U.S. Navy took the land, they also took all of the land at the end of Roslyn Street. Another view of the property, just so we're all acclimated. This is an aerial view of Spruce Street here, again, heading towards Rockland. This is the property that my clients own. And as you can see, it's already cleared out in the back, and that's where the intended building would be. And for reference, I know some of them may be listening or watching. This is Mr. Keating's house with his horse corral. This, I believe, is the O'Connor house, the Correa house, and over to the right of the Correas would be the Yakabuchi house. So Spruce Street comes this way and then turns and heads towards Rockland. The project description was submitted with on my application. And if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of go through it because it kind of gives us a baseline of information that we can all work with tonight. It says the applicant owns the land situated on the northerly side of Spruce Street, which contains 62,215 square feet of land or 1.43 acres. The lot is situated within the residential R20 zoning district and is bounded on the rear by the former Naval Air Station property and on the west by an unconstructed paper street, Roslyn Street, which I just showed you. The applicant's proposing to raise the existing two structures, a residence and a detached garage, and to construct an 8-unit townhouse building at the rear of the lot. All improvements will be situated entirely within the owner's property. The paper street area is not being utilized or altered and will remain as an added buffer. The applicant is submitting this plan to the planning board for site plan approval and for approval of a special permit under section 175-29 to allow 39.7% lot coverage, meaning 60% of the lot will be grass, trees, or landscaping. There are no wetlands on the lot. The land is not located within the town's floodplain and wetlands protection overlay district. The bulk of the lot has already been cleared of trees by the prior owners. The existing structures on this lot are approximately 50 feet off of Spruce Street. The proposed new residences will be constructed over 300 feet off Spruce Street. Initial designs contemplated 2 or 3 buildings closer to the street and to the abutting Spruce Street homes, but the submitted proposal is intended to create a secluded private residential building enhanced by significant landscape buffers, such that this building will not be visible from Spruce Street. Each residence will have 2 bedrooms, a garage parking space, and an assigned paved parking space. Additional guest parking spaces are also provided in conformance with our zoning bylaw. Although moving the building back farther away from Spruce Street will increase the costs of extended utility lines and longer private driveway, the benefits of utilizing the additional space for larger landscape areas and privacy buffers was thought to outweigh the additional construction costs. The site conforms to all setback requirements, lot area, and parking requirements. No variances are needed for this project. The units will all be connected to town water and serviced by an on-site septic system. Typical residential lighting will be utilized. There won't be any large parking lot lights. Landscape details have been provided. We'll go over those in a little bit more detail. And drainage calculations have also been submitted for review by the town's consulting engineer. The applicant respectfully requests that the planning board vote to approve the submitted plan and special permit. And we look forward to your meeting so we can review our proposed project with your board. As the board knows, the intent of the site plan review meeting is to share comments on the site plan. We don't expect it to be perfect and approved in one night. They rarely are. So we look forward to an exchange of information and ideas so that we can submit an updated plan for what we hope would be the eventual approval. I'd like to go back to how we got here. The property was purchased at foreclosure, and that sits on the building and the garage are in pretty bad shape. They have to be raised, taken down, demolished. Initially, we looked at the proposal of perhaps building a 2-unit condominium building up close near the street, near where the house is now, and then perhaps some parking to the rear, and then another 2-unit building, and then probably 2 or 3 more buildings out to the rear. It's a rather large lot. But in order to have more than one building on a lot, you need to have a variance. under our current zoning bylaws. So in order to avoid the need for a variance, we also looked at, and I've kind of superimposed several different ideas on one plan here. We looked at this type of building with a little kitty corner in it, with the 8 units. It bends, it's connected, so it's one building. It would have plenty of room for the required parking and all. Or we could have done just a straight long 9-unit building, which would have fit along this boundary line. But there are pros and cons to every proposal. This proposal over here would be directly behind the Korea's house. This proposal over here means every unit would be looking right out back towards the Keating house and to some degree towards the O'Connor house. So we kept working this around. One other thing I'd like to mention is one option that was discussed was also building the road. We have a right to use that road, to build that road. So we would pave this road and perhaps build 3 houses out, 3 houses on this 62,000 square foot lot. However, the cost of the road is significant, and so therefore you need to generate significant sale prices for these houses. So you'd be looking at large houses of 4 and 5 bedrooms each, but it just doesn't, it's not really very feasible at all. Plus, in all honesty, the building a road on that layout would actually, let me try to get to it, would be building it right next to the O'Connor's house and O'Connor's family. So we tried to avoid that by utilizing only our property, and everything that we're proposing would be on our property. And this is it, I can show you here. This is the layout that has been submitted to the board. This is a colored rendering, which I'll submit for the planning board's filing. And our goals were to, again, this is the O'Connor house, and this is the Keating house, the Korea house, and the Yakabuchi house. Just for,
planning board page, and then click the link.
oh, I'm sorry, she's talking to someone on the phone, I think. So the buildings we proposing were out back as far as we could put them to utilize the fact that this is the air base's land and most of it is wetlands. This line here shows a wetlands line out back, actually the buffer of the wetlands. So looking out back would pretty much always be vegetation, forest, that the residents of this complex would actually see every day. It'd be basically be a buffer of their own. We also wanted to keep it as far away from our other neighbors as we could. Instead of building them up close to the street and close to the neighbors, we moved them back so that this building is approximately just over 300 feet off of the street. And as you can see, Mr. Keating's house is also about 300 feet off of the street. I also highlighted where that paper street is, which will remain untouched. As I mentioned, we are not going to develop this or use it in any way. So all of the existing buffer in here, all the existing trees, none of that will change. That will serve as a buffer both for our neighbors to the west, but also for our project itself. We also proposed, lining the driveway with trees, more of as a tree-lined driveway. And we'd like to talk more in more detail towards the end of our site plan review hearing about the selective planting of evergreen trees for purposeful buffers to screen some of our neighbors for our benefit and for their benefit. We also, by locating it 300 feet back, we try to maximize our distance away from our neighbors. Oops, sorry. And as it shows, it's approximately 225 feet away from the O'Connors if we push it all the way back, about 175 feet back from Korea's, and 200 from Yakabuchi's. And there's approximately 135 feet between the buildings where Mr. Keating's house is and our proposed building here. The other thing it does by moving it backwards, it allows us to construct this traffic island and to have a rather organized flow. As you come in off of Spruce Street, you would turn to the right and get into your garage or your parking space, and then you would exit out this way. And this would be a treed landscape island, so that when you drive by Spruce Street, even if basically you're only going to see a driveway entrance, you're not going to see any buildings because they're 300 feet back. Spruce Street, probably know that as you drive down Spruce Street, for example, you'll see Mr. Keating's driveway entrance, but you don't see his house. It's out behind the trees, behind other houses. And we're trying to utilize that same effect here. So driving down Spruce Street, you essentially don't know it's here, but for the driveway and the landscaping at the entrance. These trees here on these islands would be some evergreens and some deciduous trees. So again, even if you did take the turn down, the first thing you see will be vegetation and evergreens, both for the benefit of those who are entering, but also for those who live there. So that's the reason why we have proposed to put the buildings as far back as possible, because we think it offers benefits to our most of our immediate neighbors, and it allows it to be a more of an aesthetic proposal, even though there are some additional costs to us in doing that. We are required to have 20 parking spaces, and each unit has a garage space under it, and each unit has a parking space in front of the garage. We had also proposed putting an additional space between the units, which we'll discuss in further detail, and then some extra spaces over here. So it conforms in all respects. Being in the R20 zone, the R20 zoning district, the use of it, the intent of the district as defined by a zoning bylaw is, quote, to encourage compact residential development. A lot of the neighbors in this area are single family homes. Some of them are on smaller lots. Some of them are on slightly larger lots. As we know, the Musterfield is an older part of town. And by putting the property out back, or the building out back, we don't want to disturb the view or the essence of it, but we do want to try to use our property as it's allowed by the zoning bylaw. And we think that this hopefully will address a lot of the concerns, but we're open for discussion with the planning board and, of course, your review engineer. We also, Mr. LaPointe met with the fire department, and I will give Liz a copy of this in the file. We asked our engineer to show that Abington's Tower 1, which is their longest truck, would be able to circumnavigate this property. So it was intentionally designed to be able to do that. The fire chief actually would like us, this is a 12-foot wide driveway here as you turn to the right. We're trying to basically have traffic control in here. It's just for the residents, obviously, but he would like us to widen this to about 15 feet or so in an updated site plan, which will certainly do, excuse me. And we might shave off this part of the island. And I believe when we hear a report from your review engineer, he was suggesting to eliminate this circle right here and just have one larger island, which we're certainly welcome to do that. But these are the type of things that go through the process of trying to decide how you come to a proposal that is at least ready for submission and discussion. And based on the location of the building, the comments from the fire department and all, we think that this is a nice proposal that will add some value to the property and still preserve the value to our neighbors' properties. I'll like to briefly, well, maybe I'll get back to the special permit topics. I don't want to hog the microphone here, but if we could perhaps, if your review engineer, Dave Johnson, I don't want to read through his letter. Maybe we can go through, I'm just suggesting some of his comments. We can address them when you're done or as you go. And then I'd like to revisit and talk specifically about the special permit and answer any questions that the board may have.
Is Dave Johnson on the call?
Yep, I am. Good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I assume you can hear me.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. We've done a review and I've gone over some of the comments with the design engineer, particularly in regards to utilities and drainage. So I think I'd like to stay away from those issues. I want to focus on our suggestions for the site plan, the landscaping and lighting, and the zoning issues. As Sean, can somebody put the plan up? Sean, can you put the site plan up? And share the screen? Whoever's controlling. Okay, so go to the site plan. One more, I think. Okay, and zoom up. Can you zoom up for me? Or okay. All right. The issue that we had is that they do comply with zoning, but our comment is that with the layout that they have with one, is that me or you? Okay. The comment that we had is with one parking space in the garage, one parking space in the driveway, and one space between the units, which is going to be shared by this unit and this unit. The configuration really doesn't allow for much usable guest parking. That they have 4 parking spaces over here that would be shared by the 8 units, which I don't think is adequate because, for example, this unit that's shared by this unit and this unit, it's really only one space that once it's taken, this unit doesn't really have another usable space other than over here. And these 4 are shared by 8 units. So also, there's no landscaping fronting the buildings at all. So you have pavement from the front of the building all the way to the island. Our suggestion would be to make these parking spaces that are proposed to be shared by each 2 units, to make them into landscaped areas so there is some vegetation in front of the units, and then to relocate those spaces in this manner here in the front part of the island so that it's a more usable overflow parking, so that if this unit has more need for parking beyond the 2 that they have, this is in here is available to all 8 units, as well as the 4 that are proposed over here. So you lose some pavement over here and gain some landscaping. You gain some parking that's more usable here. And to offset the increase in pavement here, you've reduced the pavement in front of the building. And our suggestion is to eliminate this cut through unless there's some overriding need for that. We feel that it's not necessary. It would reduce significantly the amount of impervious area on the site, and it would make this island a more cohesive landscape feature without this cut through. If people wanted to come out and then decide they forgot something in reverse direction, this radius here could be increased to make it convenient to swing around this corner and head back. So in terms of site planning, that's our biggest concern with the plan and our suggestions for a way to go as far as the parking and the landscaped area. The other things that we were concerned about, Sean, if you could pan it this way a little bit so we can see the intersection with Spruce.
All set?
Yeah, a little more. Okay, it's not shown on this plan, it might be shown on one of the others, but it's right here, they were proposing a mailbox right in this location, which in our opinion was a dangerous location with people coming down Spruce Street, turning to go in with a car parked in this location. Our suggestion was to either make a pull-off so that a car getting the mail could get out of the travel lane, or to move that mailbox further back into the site in this location. Of course, subject to what the postmaster wants, but we feel at a minimum it should be moved from this location for safety reasons.
Can I interrupt you for a sec, Dave? I just want to make sure. Dave is referring to the plan, and I'm assuming, Dave, you're pointing to different things, but can the planning board see what he's pointing at? This is my cursor moving right now.
We can see what you're pointing at.
Okay, so I'll try to follow what Dave's saying. So he was just talking about the initial plan showed the mailboxes being right here. And I think he makes a good point that if someone pulls over and stops to get the mail, what happens if somebody else turns in? So correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, your suggestion was pull it down the driveway somewhere. We'd have to talk obviously with the post office, but we will certainly look into that.
Or create a pull-off.
Right,
If it's gonna be near Spruce Street, to create a pull-off where a car can pull in, get the mail and not be in the travel way.
well, let me jump the gun then for you. I started sketching some of these ideas because we were able to review your letter and thought they were great ideas. So, I don't mean to interrupt you, Dave, but-
No,
So Dave's comments.
I think your plan shows exactly what I was trying to communicate.
So his thought was to change this parking space into greenery and move these 4 parking spaces here to the island. And to combine the 2 islands by getting rid of the cut through, we'll call it, into a larger island. And then at this point, we haven't talked to the post office yet, perhaps having the mailbox up here, which would allow the post officer to pull in here, drop off the mail, and then bang a Yui right here and leave. They don't like to go too far into private property whenever they can avoid it. But at the same time, we don't want to put it out on Spruce Street. They won't allow us to do that. So these were some of the things I think Dave had mentioned, which this is a very rough sketch that has not been engineered by Strong Point, but this is something that might help us discuss it.
Yeah, you may even be able by tweaking this to get an additional space right here. So you'd be gaining 1 additional space. So the board can see my concern is that if these spaces are taken and these 2 people need additional spaces, these are the only 4 that are available to the 8 units. This would give you 8 units that are available, 8 spaces that are available to all 8 units, so that a more equal distribution could be achieved, where if one person has a greater need for parking, we don't have people parking in the aisles, because with a 12 or 15-foot aisle, there really should be a no parking sign along here because of blocking the ability to
Right.
get through, both for residents, but also for fire and emergency protection. So this really should be marked as, any of the 12-foot lanes should be marked as no parking.
Agreed.
So those are the main concerns I had with the site plan. When we look at landscape and lighting, I think Sean's taken care of that. He's shown some additional lighting. Originally, the only lighting I think was down in the corner at this area here.
Right here.
In terms of landscaping, and Wayne, you can weigh on this with your landscaping background, is they're proposing a substantial amount of white pine as buffer for the site to the abutting property. And I think our opinion, and I think yours in the past, have been white pine, while they might provide a nice buffer early on, their growth habit over time is that the lower branches disappear, and the amount of, they're very brittle, and that over time, they really don't provide a meaningful buffer to the abutting properties. So we're suggesting that they look into some more permanent screening type of landscaping. The other thing that's kind of related to landscaping is under the previous plan, they showed no fencing. You want to show them, Sean, where that is?
There is some fencing going down this way.
Well, no, right, see where the red marks are, the trees?
Here.
Right there.
Oh, yes.
There was no
Yes.
fencing shown as a buffer to the people out front.
Right.
Yeah, the only fencing was parallel to the drainage easement, drainage area, perpendicular to Spruce Street. So we suggested that the fencing be continued around that 90-degree corner to
Even with
provide
that berm of, sorry to interrupt, even with that berm of soil behind it?
Well, that was one of, again, Dave has not seen this sketch that we just did between his review. I agree with what Dave's saying. In putting evergreens or anything, even a fence down in the backyard of the Korea house really doesn't get them any benefit to the Koreas. They have a lot of trees in their backyard anyhow.
Yeah.
But there is a gentle slope that comes down to the Koreas. So why not move these proposed evergreens up on top of the slope where they'd be a much more effective buffer?
Yeah.
I don't think a fence would serve any benefit to either. Maybe along the side it might, but not back here. So we are going to propose in our updated site plan show some sort of evergreen buffer up top. That's that purpose. If the board so
Yep, I can go along with that. I can go along with that. The other thing is that there are some places on the site plan, I think, where the retaining walls that they're proposing along the property line exceed 4 feet in height. So they need to look at providing guardrails as the building code requires along those sections where they're greater than 5 feet.
And we do call out for a wooden guardrail in that limited area.
Yeah, I know the guardrail up near the abutter is more for vehicles than it is for pedestrians or people who have the tendency to jump over the wall.
Okay. All right,
The big zoning issue is in the past, when applicants have come in and asked for special permits to increase lot coverage, for quite some time now, the metrics that I've used and the planning board has kind of adopted to justify an increase in coverage, I've enumerated in my report. And basically, we've asked the applicant to submit something that documents compliance with those 3 metrics. The first one was to document that the increase in runoff and how well the overall runoff is handled given the additional impervious cover. Some documentation on the impact of the reduction in open space on the abutting land uses, and that would be the buffers that they're talking about, and how that mitigates the reduction in open space. And the third one was the impact on any increase in the number of vehicle trips that result from an increase in density in impervious area, and how that relates to the fact that additional units are allowed to be on this property than would have normally been allowed without the special permit. So we can go over those 3 issues right now, although I suspect that they'll want to address these in writing for the record before the board makes their decision on the project. In summary, unless anybody has any questions about the stormwater, which is more of a technical issue between myself and the design engineer, I just would say that in general, the plans were well prepared and complete. And that would conclude my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has before they go to the general public.
Mr. Chairman, can I just hop right in real quick? if people, when you open it up to the public to speak, if they could put a comment in the chat box, I will keep track of who asked to speak when, and then so it'll be an orderly fashion on people who want to speak, if that's okay with you.
That would be fine.
All right, and then the second thing real quick is, we did receive a letter from the sewer department, which just says this proposal located on Assessors Plan 61 Lot 7 appears to have no bearing on the sewer system.
That's correct, because they're gonna have their own septic system there.
Right, and the only other thing was, the fire chief called and said he would not be able to attend tonight's meeting, but he wanted to make sure the board received his comment, and which I believe I included in your packets, and it was an email dated December 22nd. And he wanted the elimination of the island. So he just wanted me to make sure that I let you guys know that, and that you have his email stating that.
Fine, and I know we do, and the other thing is I know that I, for one, would like to see the islands there, and it looks like they've addressed that with a wider path coming in to the, I ended up in front of me now, but it's quite a bit wider than what was originally, and then they've moved it back a little bit, but we can get into that, and I'm sure we'll have another hearing and get more input if we need it. Are there any members from the board that wish to speak on the project at this point? Yes, Bruce.
And Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question. I noticed that they're doing an on-site septic system. I guess that part of the town would tie into the Rockland town septic, the sewer system. Mr. Riley or your engineers, could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I did have a meeting with the Rockland Sewer Commissioners. It's not out of the question that we would connect to the sewer system, but to be honest with you, Rockland asked us if we would also agree to replacing one of their pump stations down in Rockland on Spruce Street, Salem Street area. And the cost was just prohibitive. It didn't make sense for us to repair a septic system and a pump station in Rockland at the tune of somewhere between $75,000 to $100,000. When I think most of us are aware, the soils in the Musterfield are very good draining soils and are fine for a septic system. That septic system plan will eventually be designed and submitted to the Board of Health.
Yeah, that was the most obvious question. And then the thing was, I read the chief's comments on the traffic island and the traffic going in and out of it, and those were really good comments. And I personally would like to see the island kept. It seems like, Mr. Johnson's comments and, as far as doing the bump out for the mailboxes and stuff like that, hopefully you guys will be able to keep the island in there.
Yeah, and I did want to add one other thing the fire chief had asked for, which we haven't yet said, was he asked for a hydrant to be put somewhere in on the property. There is a hydrant down on the street, but he just asked that since we're bringing water into the property because these buildings are required to be sprinkled as they are, would we agree to bring a hydrant down just so they don't have to run hoses any longer if they had an incident on our property or one of the nearby properties? So we have need to consult with him further, but one proposal was I put an H here as a proposal to put a hydrant here, or perhaps putting it over in this area. So we will address that on the updated site plan to make sure that the fire chief does have a hydrant out here for that purpose.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. And if you could work that out with the chief and David Johnson there, as far as the placement of that goes, that would be, that would address another one of my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, you had a question.
Yeah, just to follow up on something Bruce said. So you asked, so Spruce Street is located on Rockland sewer system.
Yeah, basically, I think all of the Musterfield goes
Yeah.
to the Rockland
Well,
sewer.
that's the field section of Abington's in that, Rick.
Okay. And so you went and asked Rockland to tie in, and their response was sure, but you need to replace a pump station.
I'm listening to the points. Yeah, they want, The Rockland sewer plant has some issues with DEP that they're trying to resolve. And one of the things that would benefit them is if we help them with that pump station in particular. They have other issues, but they were looking to see if we would contribute toward that. And if this was a larger project, if the cost justified the expense, we would certainly consider it, but it's a far too small a project. These units are anticipated, based on historical data from the Water and Sewer Department. Each of these 2-bedroom townhouse units, brand new with water saving, would generate about 90 gallons a day. So to pay for $100,000 pump didn't make sense to us.
Is there a sewer pressure problem on Spruce Street?
I think it's more of an elevation issue. It's a lower part of town for Rockland, and they need to pump it up towards, I'm assuming, I don't know the design of their system, but towards the Union Street pipe, which then flows down towards their plant, which is on the other side of town.
But I mean, is this an issue that Abington residents are having in the Muster Fields area with sewer?
Well, I'm not aware. I don't think so. I think it's just kind of the age of that station that they would like to get it replaced. I don't know if they have infiltration there or not, or whatnot, but they didn't give me that detail.
No, I guess it's just good to know Rockland's asking this of Abington developments.
Yeah.
For future reference. A couple of quick questions, I guess, maybe just more notes. The design is fine. I have quibbles with the actual design of the townhouses, but it's not really here to there. But how far away is this property from North Abington? Do you know?
No, I don't. You mean as the crow flies?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you drew a circle around North Abington, is it within a half mile outside of North Abington?
Probably just about a half a mile.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
My concern is, if this is something that's being proposed for, Route 18, I probably don't have a problem with it. But the fact that it's Spruce Street, where you have basically nothing but 1-family houses, maybe a couple 2-families in that area, this seems really out of place to suddenly plop down 8 townhouses, even if it is 300 feet setback from Spruce Street. So if we're dealing with a lot coverage area, and it's because we're doing a whole bunch of units, to me, you're creating the issue, the lot coverage issue. And if there isn't a specific benefit for having this sort of project there, if it was within a half mile and then it met smart growth principles, and then we can, trigger 40R funds, that would be one thing. But I don't see the general benefit for approving this, to exceed the lot coverage when it's your project that's creating the lot coverage issue.
Well, I would like to respond to that, and I would like to talk about that special permit in a little bit more detail to follow up on Dave's 3 prerequisites and Rick's question. I can do that now, or I can do that at the end of Rick's questions, whatever you'd prefer.
That's the basic one, so.
Okay.
Sean,
So,
Sean,
yes, sir.
you might want to mention at the outset, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the land use here, the 8 units, is going to require a special permit from the Board of Appeals.
That's correct. Yes.
So everybody understands that that's also a factor in what's happening here, is that the Board of Appeals is going to have to issue a special permit for the number of units.
That's correct. And in order to get a special permit for the use, we would have to demonstrate that drainage works, the water works, the septic system works, that type of stuff. So that's the purpose why we're at the site plan review hearing first, and then we'll go to the zoning board second. But if I could address the lot coverage issue, as you know, we filed for the special permit. The current plan as was submitted would generate a 39.7% lot coverage. That lot coverage, for those who don't know, is impervious surfaces, which is buildings or pavement, basically. In the R20 zone, any new construction of any building, parking lot, or driveway requires a public hearing with notice to abutters if the total amount of impervious surfaces is over 20% of the total lot area. I believe that this 20% threshold is intentionally low, and for good reason, as it creates the need for a public hearing like this, and it triggers a requirement for the property owner to show how they intend to upgrade the existing drainage conditions on their property. The special permit is typically approved if the installation of new drainage improvements will not create any new drainage problems and will not worsen any existing drainage issues on abutting properties. For this property at 286 Spruce Street, we're proposing to install a new drainage system designed by Strong Point Engineering where no drainage system currently exists. And the proposed improvements will also improve some drainage conditions on some of our neighbors' properties. And I'll show you that in just a second. The drainage improvements, which are sometimes called stormwater management systems, were designed, as I said, by a registered professional engineer, Eric Diaz from Strong Point Engineering. And Strong Point's design is then reviewed by the town's consulting engineers from Norwood Engineering. The planning board typically will not approve a stormwater management system or the special permit for lot coverage unless and until the town's consulting engineer has reviewed and approved the final site plans and all drainage calculations. If I could, I'd like to share with you one of the plans of the existing conditions, which I think speaks to this issue. This is the sheet from our site plan, our 9-page site plan that shows the existing conditions. Each of these squiggly lines is topography. So basically, the land goes downhill from the Keating property over here, goes downhill towards the Carreras and towards the Yakabuchi property, and also downhill towards the street. So when it rains, stormwater or runoff flows from the Keating property across our property onto the Yakabuchi property, onto the Korea property, out onto the street. Okay. So these arrows are showing what is out there now, the existing conditions. What we're proposing and what Strong Point has helped us to design is any water that lands on the roofs of these buildings would be collected in the gutters, go down the pipe and into an underground drainage pipe that runs across the front. It would then be connected to this drain underneath the parking lot. The parking lot pavement all would flow into this catch basin that's in this corner. So all the water that was flowing to Yakabuchi and Korea is now captured and goes into the catch basin or into the roof drains and goes into this drainage system and then is brought out to the front of our property, where we have designed a retention area which lets the water percolate into this back to the groundwater on our property. So there'd be significantly less water flowing off of our property onto neighbors. We'd actually be improving them. We're only required to show that we don't make it worse, but I think the engineers will conclude that we're showing that we're going to be improving this issue over here to our abutters to the east. Also, the second, the first one is how do you handle any sort of increase in runoff and how is it controlled? And that's what that plan demonstrates. The second part of the 3-point test is how was the impact of reduction on open space on abutting land uses? By approving this proposal with a building 300 feet back off of Spruce Street, we create space for those vegetative buffers we described between our nearest neighbors, and we allow that creation of the landscaped island, which would be a visual barrier or buffer from Spruce Street itself and of course from our neighbors. There already are existing trees on these properties, but we would be also adding our own buffer in addition to that. We're also utilizing, as I said, that the fact that the neighbors to the rear of the property are Union Point, which contains wetlands. There are no wetlands on our property, and the proposed location of our building is again similar to the location of the Keating home. It's about 300 feet back. So I think that gives you a good example of how effective that is, where you can't really see the building that far set back off of the street. You only see the driveway as you go by. You don't see Mr. Keating's horse corral or his house. You're not going to see this building unless you actually turn down the driveway and take a look. So we are trying to mitigate the change in the use of this property. Again, this is already cleared out back there for the most part, but we're trying to now add some trees towards the front to create the buffer. But the longer 300-foot driveway requires more pavement, and thus that increases our lot coverage. So it's a give and take scenario. And thus the special permit would allow us to move the building back and create that island effect, that circular driveway, instead of a standard cookie cutter parking lot. So the special permit helps us create the landscape island for the benefit of the neighbors and also for the future residents of these homes. And then third and lastly, the question about any impact in the increase of vehicle trips resulting from any additional spaces allowed. The units are limited to no more than 2 bedrooms each, which effectively limits the amount of vehicles and traffic coming into or from this property. Townhouse condos are popular because they're good starter homes for younger residents, and they're also investment opportunities for older residents who want to sell their larger homes and downsize and perhaps stay in this area, with the added benefit of knowing that the condo association is required to maintain the property throughout the year. The planning board is very familiar with the limited traffic added by these types of residences, as these homes are typically inhabited by a husband and wife or single person. All units will be sold as condo units and not going to be an apartment building. We find that unit owners have a vested interest in maintaining the cleanliness and the maintenance of their property. And since this will be private property, we're not building a public road, the town will not be responsible to pay for any snow plowing, and no taxpayer dollars will be used to repair any pavement issues or any future maintenance. Those will all remain the responsibility and expense of the homeowners. So we believe that this proposal conforms to all the parking requirements, in fact, has extra parking, as Mr. Johnson was suggesting. It conforms to all the building setback requirements, and we will demonstrate and we will amend it and update it to show that it conforms to all drainage requirements. The approval of the special permit would then confirm that the final site plan will not cause or worsen any drainage issues on abutting properties, and in fact would effectively reduce the amount of stormwater flowing onto our neighboring properties to the east. For those reasons, I think the special permit should be approved by the planning board.
Any other comments from the board?
I would ask that you don't approve it tonight because we do need to show you the final plan with the final percentage.
Yes, Bruce.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I just have one more question. I'm sorry. I meant to cover this. Okay, Mr. Riley or whoever, how many square feet is this total in residential? I mean, you know, I'm going to pick up on Rick, what Mr. Collins was saying. You know, this is a neighborhood of single family homes, and Mr. LaPointe is proposing to put 8 units in there. And in spite of all the engineering stuff, and I know they have to get a special permit and variances and stuff. I'm not really crazy about 8 units in there. So, but my question is, how many square feet are these 8 units in total versus the size of the average single family residential home in the neighborhood? Just curious.
I don't have that number in front of me. I can certainly get you that number.
Attorney Riley, if I may.
Eric, our professional engineer. Thank you, Eric.
Sure, not a problem. Seems like a good time to step in and introduce myself. For the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering Solutions. In response to Mr. Hughes' question, the footprint of the 8 buildings totals approximately 5,200 square feet. Spread over 2 floors is going to be about 10,004. So if you figure the average house size in this neighborhood is probably somewhere around 2,000 square feet, roughly, I would say we're probably about 2.5 times larger than that in footprint size for all 8 units combined.
How many single family houses? I'm going to be the skunk in the woodpile here, I guess. Well, that's an acronym. How many single family houses could you build on this lot if you strictly went by R20?
That's a good question, and not one that I've investigated. I know that I've talked with Attorney Riley and with the LaPointes before, and I know that at some point there was a proposal for 3, but I believe 3 required, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it required improvements to the paper street. Is that correct, Mr. Riley?
Yeah, you'd have to build a roadway in order to create, it becomes a different type of plan. As the board knows, a condominium is privately owned. So it's a private driveway, private parking, private home ownership. If you're building single family houses, they all have to be on their separate lots with frontage on a new street. So you would have to build Rosalind Street and you'd use again, we have about 62,000 square feet of land. Each lot would have to be 20,000 square feet. So in just quick addition or quick division, there should be enough for approximately 3 houses.
Yeah, I figured that, but I just wanted to hear it from you guys. Yeah, this is the type of question that's going to be asked, I think, further on in the meeting. So I'm just trying to.
Well, one thing I think
better at and ask these questions. Thank you.
Just to build off of that point and a little bit further, if we were to build 3 single-family houses, obviously it's a different plan, requires different construction of the roadway, things like that. But an average footprint of 2,000 square feet per house comes out to about 6 square foot of footprint. as opposed to the 5,200 square foot that we're proposing now. So if we were to go that route and go with something a little more quote unquote traditional, maybe for the neighborhood, we'd still be looking at a footprint area of roughly the same, if not even larger than what we're talking for the structure now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I want to open up now to the public, and if you can get on the chat room so that we'll know who to take in order, and we'll have that done by Liz. Liz, if you would.
Mr. Keating is waiting.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kevin Keating. I live at 272 Spruce Street. I am a direct abutting neighbor. I have 250 feet at least abutting the property for the new proposed subdivision. This property is in a zoned R20 to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood, which is all modest single-family homes with a lot of small children on the street. This proposal would overpower the neighborhood, number one. Number two, all these numbers that I'm hearing from everybody here are completely incorrect. These 8-unit, 2-bedroom townhouses have the capacity of 2 couples, in each one having a car. There could be as many as 4 cars per unit. Times 8 would be 32 more cars in the neighborhood. That is a safety issue, especially for the young children. Has a traffic study been done on this new subdivision plan? That's my first question. Also on that plan is a dumpster almost perpendicular to my house. Why isn't it on the other side of the subdivision plan where there is no residence? That's number two. Number three, this is my bigger problem. My source of water for my house is a well. They are planning on putting a 5,000-gallon septic tank fairly close to my house. What if that septic system cracks or fails? Has a distance calculation been done to show how far from the well this septic system would be? And what if my well gets contaminated or fails? Who is responsible for this? Is it the town or is it Mr. LaPointe? Those are the big questions I have. This subdivision plan is just way overpowering for this neighborhood. And one other thing from the engineer, the houses on this street are not 2,000 square feet. They're much less than that. Those are my comments, but my biggest one is this subdivision is too big for the neighborhood. And it's gonna have safety issues for the young kids and for everybody else. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Keaton. On the sewerage, I know there's state regulations on that. Dave, are you familiar with that? If you could respond on that. I know that the septic system has to be so many feet away from a well source.
Yeah, minimum of 100 feet.
Even a 5,000-gallon holding tank.
And
Yeah, it's the actual subsurface leaching area is 100 feet. Given the amount of flow here, there may be some need for it to go even further. Actually, we were not aware, and I don't know if Eric was aware, if he has a location of that well. We were not aware that there's a well on our property.
I'm sure you'll look into that.
Yeah. And that is my only source of water also.
On the dumpster, I think that you can look at that in your plans. And the traffic study, I'm not quite sure it's necessary for each issue. Liz, some more questions, please?
Well, again, I mean, you're talking, it could be as many as 32 additional cars.
I don't,
Some place that had 2 cars in it. I mean, that's just overpowering as a safety issue for the neighborhood.
I probably wouldn't, as one member, agree with you on that, but certainly we will take all that into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you. We have someone else waiting, Liz.
Yes, you have Adam Hobart.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
My name is Adam Hobart. I'm here representing Shirley Hobart, who lives at 285 Spruce Street, which is the house directly across from the proposed site. My grandmother is 88 years old, so she can't participate in this Zoom. I also have my father, Robert Hobart, who is her son on the call. You know, I wanted to raise just a couple concerns. You know, Eric beat me to a lot of them about the increase in traffic and moreover the fact that something like this just, you know, it's very unusual for the area. I think Rick, you alluded to it a little bit as well. I mean, we are quite a ways away from North Abington. There isn't really anything like this. That doesn't mean that there can't be, but in this specific area in the muster fields, it just doesn't fit, in my opinion. I also have a little bit of a concern about, you know, if something like this is you know, a wolf in sheep's clothing. You know, Southfield, Lindsay Cruiser, the chairman of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, said in 2018 that they plan on revitalizing the wetlands in that area. And that was reinforced by Tom Henderson, who's also the current chairman of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority. You know, I have concerns that this is, you know, a way for the LaPointes to get an in on leveraging that road to connect to Southfields when that happens. You know, that's something that Abington will have to face when that happens. But I have concerns that, you know, in 5 years that road will suddenly be connected to Southfield, and that throughput is extremely risky for the area. You know, and lastly, my concern is it may be well and good that these aren't apartments and they're condos, and that sounds great, but condos can be subletted and without any regulation. You know, so somebody could buy this as an investment property and Airbnb it and lease it out to somebody, and they sublet it out to somebody else. And now the homeowners association has no idea who lives where, and what goes on. Those are my 3 concerns. And I just briefly want to wrap up with this. You know, this is something very personal to our situation. But I want the board to hear this. So the road that is proposed is directly in front of my grandmother's house. We lost my grandfather about a year ago. My grandmother suffers from dementia. If there is a kid playing with a ball in front of her house for 8 seconds, she calls a family member. I cannot imagine what our phones are going to be like if there's 32 potential, as Eric said, cars coming in and out with their lights shining directly into her bay window every minute of every day. I cannot, again, this is personal, but I cannot, you know, feasibly, you know, imagine a world where that happens. So I want the board to, you know, to listen to that and consider it. Again, it's a very personal to us, but something to be considered, and I will give back my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hobart. Do we have another call, Liz?
Yes, you do. Mr. Devereaux or BJ Devereaux?
He needs to be unmuted.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. The question I have is the consulting engineer, Mr. Johnson, when he was talking about it, he said the 8 units over here and the proposed 4 units. Are there another 4 units proposed? I don't know where they go. I don't know if he seemed to be over by the Yakabuchi property at that point. Is there an additional 4 units going to be proposed as a second phase to this project?
No, there is just one. There were some other plans shown, and I think that's where you're getting that from, Mr. Devereaux. But it's an 8 unit straight shot.
There's there's eight shared parking spaces for the 8 units. Four as we suggested in the island, and then there's an additional 4 on the right side of the property. Sean, if you want to put up the plan so we could see what
I
those other 4
I
are.
do recall those parking spaces. I thought you said units, so I thought we were talking about additional phasing at some point.
No,
Um,
it's parking spaces.
in terms of the lot coverage, that Mr. Diaz mentioned, I don't think the footprints of the houses would be 2,000 square feet each, because I don't think they'd be building ranch houses. I think there'd be 1,000 each, because in all likelihood, there'd be 2-story homes. And I went on to some satellite imaging as the meeting was going on to investigate what Mr. Collins brought up in terms of how far is the property from North Abington. And I came up with approximately 2,800 square feet to North Avenue in a straight line from this property to North Avenue. I think it's a lot of density for the site. I think it's a lot of density for the neighborhood, and you're putting multifamily basically. I mean, we can call it condo. The market seems to be churning. By the time construction's completed, who knows where the market's at? So they could potentially turn into rental units. I just think it's too much. It's too much for the neighborhood. And to introduce multiple units into a primarily single family neighborhood. There's 1 or 2 families down there on Spruce Street, very close to the intersection of North Avenue. Those are the only ones I know of in the muster field. So I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot for the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Devereaux. Who do we have next, Liz?
Don't think there's anybody next.
You have Jessica. We have a Jessica and a Patricia asking to speak.
Oh, we have
Oh,
Jessica.
thank you, Kevin.
We have Jessica speak.
Hi, good evening, board. The only issue that I'd like to bring up that hasn't been mentioned is the safety issue in regards to there are no sidewalks in this part of Spruce Street. So adding these extra residential units, as I sit here in my 1,200 square foot house, and it's pitch black outside right now, and we have mobility residents who have mobility issues that are in wheelchairs and that do not even have a sidewalk to protect themselves from the traffic that currently drives down this way. So if we add an extra 8 units, let's moderately say 16 people, 16 vehicles, it's a safety issue, especially with no sidewalks and no lighting in this whole area. It just doesn't fit for this part of the of Abington. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, Patricia.
Hello, that's actually your son, Paul, speaking. I wanted
Okay.
to chime in real quick. I'm here with my mother right now. One question for you. Across the street from Yakabuchi is where we live, and our neighbor at 306 Spruce Street. In the spring, we do get water in our backyard, and our property drops from Spruce Street in lowers. So my concern about even adding that drain, which you mentioned the water leaches back into the ground, is that water going to end up across the street in our lower backyards? At 306 gets a lot of water. 317 Spruce Street gets a little bit on occasion, but enough that it's noticeable. It doesn't seep into the ground quickly. So my concern is not so much in the summer or even most of the winter months, but we'll have a very wet spring and we'll have water in our backyard. So my concern there is with this new addition of the draining, is it's going to add more water flowing from that property into our backyards.
I can comment on that briefly, Mr. Chair, if you'd like. Mr. Chair, you're muted.
Fine, thank you.
Sure.
The train was going by, so I didn't want to interrupt, so I muted myself and then I couldn't get back on and I apologize.
No worries.
Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that I just wanted to touch very, very briefly on the design of that stormwater drainage system. We are very fortunate in this neighborhood that we have great soils. I don't think that that's a secret to anybody out there. When we design stormwater systems, we design them for different what's called storm events, and they're based on an intensity. So the smaller system we design for is, let's say, a 2-year storm event. And that's a storm that will come around on average every 2 years. That's about 3.5 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. And the largest storm that we designed for is a 100-year storm event, which is closer to 8.5 inches per rain in a 24-hour period. As of right now, in the existing conditions on the site, there is no stormwater control at all. So when it does rain, that water hits the ground and it flows across the property, through the properties adjacent to Spruce Street, across Spruce Street, and if it makes its way now into the backyards across the street, there's nothing there to stop it. The design of our stormwater system, we will be collecting stormwater for all the way up to what we call a 25-year storm event. All of that water gets collected and maintained and discharged back into the soils on the site. So we are not letting any stormwater off the site in those storm events. That's a pretty substantial improvement over what's there into the current condition, actually, where there is no control to go into a great deal of control. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any other questions?
Rob Hobart wanted to speak.
Please, Rob Hobart.
Hello, board. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate a few things that were already mentioned. I don't want to beat a dead horse with anything. I took a few comments made by, I think, Mr. Collins and Mr. Hughes. In general, I think that this area and the muster field in general, right at this time, is not a place for something like this, to be honest. I grew up in that 285 Spruce across the street. I see that there's been a lot of things put into this in planning it, obviously, but I think you've got an awful lot of issues that I think the abutters have and concerns that need to be strongly addressed, such as the traffic and the increase. You're basically going to put a road in what is now a driveway going in off of Spruce. And again, I don't want to repeat things, but you don't have sidewalks. You do have some wheelchairs that are being used on this road. I mean, it just seems that this particular size project maybe isn't right for this, and that's my main concern, especially with the abutters and starting something, a precedent of having 8 units, a 2 or 3 or 2 units I can see possibly. And in fact, that's what I thought might happen. Being familiar with the process that took place in the purchase and so forth, I was half expecting to see that there might be a cul-de-sac or there might be a couple units being built in there upon purchase. I don't know how well thought out before the purchase this was. I would think that if I came in thinking I was getting this and going to throw in 8 units into this area of the muster field, I might think twice about the purchase and have a little bit more done ahead of time to see that this might be something that's viable for the area. So that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hobart. Are there anyone else? Is there anyone else?
That was it on the list.
Are there any other comments from any of the board members? Yes, Bruce.
And Mr. Smith, I just wanted to go back to the traffic issues that have been raised. There's no sidewalks on that street. You put 8 families in there. It's, yeah, like you say, it's probably half a mile from North Abington Center. Conceivably, they might want to walk down to the restaurants or the things that are North Abington Center. I mean, if you're in halfway decent shape, you could do it. And the street isn't in the greatest condition. I think it's probably in better condition than it is on Rockland end. I used to work for Old Colony. I'm retired there now. At the very least, I would ask the engineer to talk to Old Colony and find out if any traffic counts have been done on that street. You know, if you say you don't need a traffic study, that was my foundation. I was a planner, professional planner for 35 years before I retired, and my foundation is traffic. And I've been on this board a long time, and that's where I always do my comments. But I'm no sidewalks, a street that's not in great shape. You know, increased traffic on that street. I'd like to know what the existing traffic conditions are, what the traffic projections would be with this increased development, number of trips going in and out of the site. And you know, echoing what Mr. Collins has said and other people have said, I wouldn't have, I'm sorry, Mr. Diaz, but I think you greatly exaggerate the size of the houses in the neighborhood. I think one of the commenters said more like about 1,200 square feet, and that's probably about right, I think. So I'm concerned about traffic impacts. I think this project is way too big for this neighborhood. And, you know, potential drainage issues, you know, the soil drains, putting in a septic system, and that gentleman's got a well, you know, 100 feet away from that.
I don't
some
think,
issues that have been brought up tonight that really need to be looked at. That's my comment. Thank you.
thank you. I think we need to establish the well distance from the septic system. I don't think that was proof, but I'm sure it will be. Are there any other questions? I would think that, yes, Sean.
Obviously with this, where I'm assuming this hearing will get continued for further discussions, but before we did, would you mind if I just asked the board for some feedback specifically on some of the buffering issues in design? The zoning bylaw allows the planning board to have some flexibility with that. And if you don't mind, if I could share the current draft, I wanted to just point out a few things, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
So as we're currently showing, we have a solid fence coming down this side along the Koreas. And one of the questions from your review engineer was what kind of solid fence? And typically, a lot of these type of projects would have your residential white solid vinyl fence, which we're fine with doing. If that's what the board would like to see, that's what we would do. We plan on, for aesthetic purposes, having like a post and rail fence going down the driveway. But this would be more of a privacy buffer for the Koreas. Unless we get difficult, we'll continue with that design. And we've already touched on the rear of the Koreas, using evergreens on top of the slope would be the most effective buffer there. We don't call for any sort of buffer on this side because this is just all open land, basically. It's several hundred feet back. The Yakabuchi house is here, so there is nothing to buffer it from. So I don't think there's a need to do anything on this side, nor on the rear, because that's Union Point is behind us. And on the, I guess it's the western side, we currently show some street trees. Oops, sorry. Street trees on the left side coming in, really more of ornamental landscaping, because we're also keeping this, we're not touching the paper street, and whatever trees there are there. There aren't a lot of trees out front towards the street. In fact, I think the O'Connors sometimes use it for parking, which is great. We're not adjusting or touching that area. But we don't have a fence along this road. They have a fence in their backyard already, meaning the O'Connors. We'd have that 34 feet buffer area. Then we have our trees. Our building, as I said, is over 200 something feet back here. We do show some trees along the side of a building, which is the closest house would be Mr. Keating's. We're more than willing, if he wants us to put up a 30 or 40 foot fence piece here or a couple of extra evergreens. Well, I'm just wondering if the board has any direction they'd like to see in the next update of the plan.
Well, no white pines, Sean.
No white pines is fine. That's okay.
I'd be curious.
No burning bushes either. No,
yeah. I'd be curious to see what the neighbors felt about all the white fencing. It's not really a fenced out neighborhood, and I don't see a lot of white fences in the neighborhood. But
yeah, and that's why I asked.
Detail, but I think.
Well, how about if I'll ask the points to try to contact the Koreas and ask what they would prefer, and we'll try to show that on a plan. All right.
fine. Any other questions?
Again, as you said, Mr. Chair, we definitely we need to know the distance between the gentleman's water well and the leaching fields for this project. That has to be identified. But when we talk about this the next time, please.
We can check with Mr. Keating over the records of the Board of Health. I'm sure his well's registered with the Board of Health, and you know, that would be part of the septic system design approval process from the Board of Health, obviously, but we can try to get that information in advance.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize time, Mr. Dees. The septic system hasn't been designed yet?
The septic system has been designed. The septic system design plans have not been presented to the Board of Health at this point.
Is it? We've seen a lot of these plans before the board. I would just hope that when you do submit the plan, Mr. Lapointe, spend some money and get an advanced system. You know, there's all kinds of really good septic system, you know, wastewater treatment plant, whatever systems out there. And I'd like to see a state of the art, you know, something that would really be a good system. If you're going to spend the money to do this, get something that would really be good. So not to cause issues with, I don't know how many water wells there are in the neighborhood, but you always have that problem of the leaching fields potentially impacting wells, groundwater in the area and stuff like that. So I would like to see a really good system that wouldn't impact the groundwater levels in the neighborhood. You know, I mean, most of Abington is on sewer now. If you're going to spend the money to have one of these systems, please do it right so it doesn't impact groundwater. Thank you.
I can assure you we will do that. And I can also let you know that by state law, a condominium has to inspect their septic system at least, I believe it's every 2 years, 3 years if they have pumping records. So it's continually always inspected, so if there's any initial signs of an issue, it's addressed early. So that's a benefit. And to get back to one comment that was made earlier, just we'll try to address a lot of the comments at the next meeting that we attend. As far as short-term rentals, the condominium documents do not allow Airbnb or short-term rentals, things like that. We put that right in there. That's a Fannie Mae requirement also, because we do want to attract you know, owners to this property. A single-family house can be rented, just like a condo can be rented, but the condominium could actually establish some guidelines and restrictions.
Thank you, Sean. Can we have a motion to continue the hearing to the 1st of February, if that's convenient for the, you want to make it longer than that?
Yeah, with some of the questions you've asked, I think we're going to need time to come back to you on March 1st.
So we'll continue, the motion would be to continue the hearing to March 1st.
Motion.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Well, yes,
Yes.
no, I'd like to, if I could, I just wanted to, where I'm at right now with this project, after listening to the neighbors, eight units seems like a deal breaker for this project. I mean, just from an architectural point of view. I think most of everything else, the questions I've had have been addressed. I'm not a big fan of the fences if the neighbors aren't for the fences. And also, this is not the first, but this is one of many designs we've been getting where there's no areas for the families to go outside and have any recreation space. There's no place to put out a crib or anything for the kids to play. It seems like if rather than or covering more capacity than you're allowed to, that cutting back in the buildings and opening up an area for a grassy area for the kids, for the families can go outside and have a barbecue or something, would be a place, whatever they want to use it for. But that's what I just wanted to pass along my thinking at this point for you, Sean.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll on the motion to extend to move the meeting continuation till the 1st of March. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and for the neighbors' comments. Appreciate the input.
Thank you all.
Public hearing, special permit 208 Center Avenue. And there's a potential use of rule of necessity. I will abstain from this meeting, and I will have Bruce run the meeting. We need to have 4 votes to do this, and hopefully Bob will be that other vote, and he wants to speak on that. So if I can be excused from the meeting for this, and get right back on when it's over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Bruce Hughes. I'm Vice Chair, Planning Board, 69 Randall Street. I'm going to read the public hearing notice. The Abington Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 4th, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. via Zoom on the petition of Rockwood Realty Trust, P.O. Box 1365, Pembroke, Mass, for a special permit to build a single-family home and allow an all residential use in a transit-oriented development, TOD district, under the Abington zoning bylaw, section 175-37. The property is located at 208 Center Ave on the assessor's plans, maps 24, lot 22. Plans can be viewed at the town clerk's office, Wayne P. Smith, Chairman, December 21st and December 28th, 2020. We all have in our packets the plans and the application for site plan review. Who's speaking on this tonight, please?
Before we get started, Bruce,
Yes, sir.
I have a conflict with this also because I'm in a butter. But hence, we're going to invoke the rule of necessity, because without it, there wouldn't be sufficient members to act on the matter, because we need 4. And obviously the chairman excluded himself.
I'm sorry, Mr. Soper, I saw that communication and you're entirely right. So you're able to participate in this tonight. So that, just so that's clear.
It needs to be part of the minutes, yep.
Yes, it's clear that we have received, let me get it in front of you, please. So we did receive a communication from our lawyers at, the big law firm that represents the town. And it was spelled out, this whole matter was discussed. And let me see if I get the wording on this. Hang on, please.
Actually, Liz has the proper wording. I have it in front of me too, if you need it.
Okay, yeah, all right.
It's got to be part of the minutes.
Just so that, Ms. Shea, when you do the minutes, that you enter in the letter that we received from our attorneys that okayed Mr. Soper, explaining what the rule of law was in this matter, and explaining that Mr. Soper could participate in this meeting.
Okay, hold on, because I think he has to do it
Right, which is
at the meeting. Right.
part of the
So
meeting,
you
which,
just said you just said you invoked the rule of necessity because there wouldn't be a sufficient number of numbers to act. And then briefly state what the prohibited financial interest is. I'm not sure that there's any prohibited financial interest, but you are a
No.
direct abutter to the
right,
property.
it's in the brief from the attorney, briefly state the prohibited financial interests. It goes on to, hang on one second. I'm in a butter, and certainly there is an actual financial benefit or detriment relative to the project. So there is an assumed, but in the State Ethics Commission
The
policy,
State Ethics Commission,
presumes such an interest, and so invoke the rule.
Yeah,
it's necessity.
I've got the wording here,
Yeah.
If this is a
yeah,
letter
and I
from
will
Brian.
add that exact wording into the minutes.
Yeah, Brian Riley, if it's any other than his immediate family, meaning the chair, then the 19 prohibition does not apply and he may participate in a special permit proceeding without violating section 19. And again, just for the record, for the public listening to this is a letter from Brian Riley of the Copeland and Page Law Firm, and it was dated December 28th. And it's to Liz Shea and the people, and it discusses the rule of necessity. So hopefully we've made this clear that Mr. Soper's attorney is advised that Mr. Soper is entirely permissible to participate in this. And I've cited the sources on this. So I think we can proceed now. if everyone is, if we're all clear. And thank you, Mr. Soper. Appreciate that. I have it right here. I should have brought it up. I'm sorry.
And
So,
Mr. Chairman, before we move, just after the presentation, again, if we could follow that same format of having people request to speak through the chat function.
yes. And I have
Thank you.
I have the Zoom chat, the Zoom group chat on my computer here, so I can see it. So we're going to start
Okay,
with presumably Mr. Riley doing a presentation, then we'll get the board, and then we'll get the public in this. So
Thank you,
Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Riley at 500 Washington Street. And I am representing the applicant Jason Kennedy of Rockwood Realty Trust, who is proposing to purchase this property from Bob and Pam Whalen, who live at 208 Center Ave. Jason is online with us tonight. If there's any questions for Jason. I would like to also disclose, first of all, we have no objection or concern the fact that the board has to invoke the rule of necessity because we need 4 members to vote tonight. I also want to confirm for the record that I believe you said that the attorney from Copeland and Page is named Brian Riley. He is not a relation to me. I do not know him.
It looks like it's spelled differently.
Okay.
It's spelled, it's R-I-L-E-Y as opposed to how you spell your name, Attorney Riley. I just want to put that into public comment too.
Okay. Again, Jason Kennedy from Rockwood Realty Trust owns a company called Kennedy Built. He's been a contractor home builder for 15 or 20 years. More recently in Abington, he actually built a home on East Street in Abington. He's built 2 homes up in Century Estates in Abington. So he's familiar with our building inspector and he's familiar with the town of Abington. We are here for a special permit under 175-37C. And again, I'll try to do something similar to what I did last time and share some information on screen with you, if you can bear with me, and hopefully this works well. So our project description, this is a unique situation. Bob and Pam Whalen own the large 5-bedroom single-family home and adjacent land situated and known as 208 Center Avenue, which is Route 123, where they've lived for over 30 years. The property contains approximately 60,400 square feet of land and has 189 feet of frontage on the north side of Center Avenue. It features a large rear yard extending about 400 feet off of Center Avenue, and a portion of the lot, the rear of the lot, borders on Island Grove Pond. The front 200 to 250 feet of the Whalen's property is situated within the Transit-Oriented Development or TOD district, the TOD district, which requires lots to have a minimum lot area of 10,000 square feet and 50 feet of frontage. The TOD regulations also require only a 5-foot front setback, meaning the buildings can be up to 5 feet close to the street. They must be 20 feet off the rear lot line, and they can be as little as 10 feet off the side lot line, or 10-foot side setbacks. Thus, the Whalens could split their property into 3 lots, each lot being at least 50 feet wide, or they could sell some or all of their property to a developer of a multifamily project, a commercial building, or a combination of both, all of which are allowed by right or by special permit in the TOD district, the Transit-Oriented Development District. The Whalens sought to sell their property and retire, but they have been looking for a buyer who would would be willing to renovate and save their existing home at 208 Center Ave, and B, would commit to preserving the beauty of the waterfront property by not building a multifamily or commercial development. Rockwood Realty Trust, or Jason Kennedy, has signed a purchase and sale agreement with the Whalens, which is subject to a condition that that Rockwood can purchase the Whalen property only if Rockwood can obtain the necessary permits and approvals to renovate the existing single-family residence and build no more than 1 single-family house on the large lot on the western side of the Whalen property. Pursuant to 175-37C, however, the planning board must grant a special permit in order to allow the construction of a structure which is 100% residential, specifically the desired new single-family residence. Approval, if we were to ask for a commercial building or a mixed commercial residential building, we wouldn't need this special permit, but to go for a 100% residential structure, a single-family home, we need a special permit from the planning board. Approval of a 100% residential use also triggers a change to the setback requirements. Per section 175-37C3C, All residential setbacks must be at least 25 feet. In order to have the proposed new single-family line up with front setbacks for the other nearby homes, as opposed to building the new house way out back behind the abutting homes, a 2-foot side setback variance will be required from the zoning board. And that is shown in your plan. And I'd like to talk to you as part of this hearing, a little update on that regard. We believe that the construction of a new single-family home between the Whalen's existing single-family home at 208 Center Ave and the abutting 2-family home at 198 Center Ave, which is owned by Mr. Buckley, is an appropriate use of the available land, given that the majority of abutting properties on the northern side of Center Avenue are 1-family, 2-family homes. The approval of the special permit also guarantees that the bulk of the land will remain as lawn and vegetation and will also have minimal or no impact on the wetlands, the pond, at the rear of the property. In comparison, a commercial or multifamily proposal would likely require more pavement, underground drainage, utility lines, less vegetation, and larger buildings, and would change the character of the locust property and the value of abutting properties. The applicant respectfully requests that the planning board vote to approve the requested special permit, and we look forward to presenting more details at your next available hearing date. And again, if I could show you the assessor's plan, this is Route 123 or Center Avenue going out this way. You're heading, you're crossing the railroad tracks and heading towards Target and Rockland. This is Park Street or Park Ave. It's really Park Avenue. It says Park Street on the assessor's plans. This is the Whalen's property. You can see it's a rather large piece of property, and the train entrance to the train station is right here. This is the train station, the commuter rail over here. So again, this is Route 123 or Center Avenue, and this is the Whalen's property. Aerial view of that same property. This is the Whalen's house, large 5-bedroom house with a large detached garage building, which is in a state of disrepair out in the rear. This is the Buckley home here. You'll see on the Whalen property, there is a driveway on the right side coming off Center Ave, and there's a driveway also on the left side where the more of the land is, which goes out back as an open paved area, and it services this old detached building. And you can see part of the pond up in this area, and also Park Avenue with some of the Park Avenue residents that also abut up against the Whalen property. Let me see here as we turn on, again, just showing now our proposal would be to build a new home right in this general area and to remove all of the pavement out in the rear and to remove the dilapidated garage building out back. You can see the garage is quite a large garage. It's almost the size of the house. It'd be approximately the size of the house to be built, the footprint. All of this rear pavement would be converted to back lawn area for the new house and a back lawn area for the existing house. And I think I blew it up one more time just to see the same thing a little bit better. Again, we'd like to utilize the existing driveway for the proposed new house. The existing house we propose would have a garage, and we can show you, talk to you more about that. And again, the number one item and requirement from the Whalens was that this house would be preserved and renovated for sale, which Mr. Kennedy has a lot of experience in renovating houses and plans to do if we can get the special permit for the single family house for here, and we need a zoning setback variance, which we'll talk to the zoning board. I believe it's later this month. This is a copy of the plan that was submitted to you, which shows the proposed lot lines. This lot line here is actually an existing lot line between the two parcels that the Whalens purchased. The only thing that's really changed is they've extended the lot out back so that this house, the existing house, would have a longer backyard, a larger backyard area. You can see this barn is to be removed, is marked right there. Here's where the proposed new house would be. It would be just slightly back behind the front of the Whalen house. And if I went back to the aerial, you'll see the Buckley house is actually a little bit closer to the street than both the Whalen house and the proposed house. But it's generally in line with those houses. Just to blow up this plan a little bit more for you, the submitted plan showed that the proposed house was 36 feet wide and would have a 25-foot setback on the left and 23.6 on the right. However, since we've submitted this plan to the board, the plan that's gone to the zoning board, we think is a better plan. It is a house with a garage under which requires a different setback because it's a slightly wider house. The reason why we're asking for the garage is, frankly, it's New England. Using this driveway, we didn't want to have an extended driveway with pavement, but we do want to have a place where people can park their cars under the snow, out of the snow. And in doing that, the setback would be 20 feet on the left towards Mr. Buckley. It would be 14.3. There'd be about 25 feet between the two houses. We think this is a more of a typical New England style house, which would be more appealable, and it allows us to have a nice backyard for our family that would move in here. For tonight, the planning board is not approving the size of the house or the setbacks. They're just approving, we're asking you to approve the use, the single family use by special permit. If we are successful and you agree that a single family house is the way to go, then we would go to the zoning board to ask for the setbacks to allow us for the location of the house. Hopefully you followed me there. So we would say that to put a commercial building here would not be a wise planning decision because we're on the north side of Center Avenue and there hasn't been any sort of demand for commercial development. The south side of Center Avenue has the actual commuter rail. And there's been some discussion about what can be used then, something that's convenient and accessory to the commuter rail. That's one of the thoughts why the Dunkin' Donuts went down the street, because it's on that side of the street. As you know, Honeydew's down there at the intersection, along with, I believe, Mary Lou's is down there. But to put a commercial building in between the Wayland House and the Buckley House doesn't make a lot of sense. You could tear down the Wayland House and have this large 189 feet of frontage and the large lot and do a lot more. And to be frank and be honest, the Waylands, if they didn't care about saving this house, could sell this property for a lot more money to someone who would come in and ask for a larger commercial building or buildings, or condominiums or mixed use properties would fit very well in here. But they would like to preserve their house, and they have been friends with Mr. Buckley for a long time, and wanted to make sure he was satisfied. And to that effect, I have spoken with two of Mr. Buckley's nephews, and also an attorney that worked with Mr. Buckley. I believe one of his nephews, John Buckley, may still be online, but they have okayed me to tell you that as part of our proposal to the zoning, Mr. Buckley, Father Buckley, I should say, Father Buckley would like us to plant some green giant arborvitaes along this lot line, which we have no problem doing, both for the benefit of Mr. Buckley and for our house. He owns a 2-family house, but we will be planting those arborvitaes along this lot line area as an additional visual screen. There is some existing trees and scrub brush here, but we figured whatever's on our land, a lot of it will be disturbed, so we will replace what we disturb with the arborvitaes, and obviously whatever is on Mr. Buckley's side will be preserved because that's on his land. So we would propose that the single family is the best use and maintains the value and fits best and allows an attractive house to be built with a nice backyard for both houses and brings the original 208 Center Ave house to glory, back to its original glory. It's an older house, a nice Victorian. I think a lot of you are familiar with it. And any idea of putting a building out back would create different problems and different permitting issues. It also puts, if you build a house out back here, you're now in the backyard of your Park Street neighbors, at least view-wise, and you get within the 200-foot Riverfront Protection Act. So now you need a whole different set of permits. They don't want you to build within the 200 feet if you can bring it out front, away from the 200 feet. So we propose to line it up with the other houses and ask the zoning board to approve this plan and the planning board to approve this use. Again, Jason is online with us. I am here. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer.
Mr. Jason, would you like to speak at all on this additionally?
Good evening, and thank you for hearing the proposal that Sean Riley detailed. I'm not sure that I particularly have anything to add that Sean did not outline, but as you can see, the single family is a minimal use for this particular parcel. And I know Sean had done some sketches of other things that we possibly could do. which shows a much higher use for this property. But like he said, the Whalens were interested in keeping the home that they've worked on over the years and completing the restoration and adding this additional home would also be a benefit to the overall neighborhood versus having commercial property potentially 5 feet from the street.
All right, great. Thank you. I just wanted you to, be able to have a chance to introduce yourself and make some initial comments. Now I'll open this up to the board. Any of the board members care to make any comments on this, please? Mr. Rick, Mr. Collins.
I stopped out there today and talked to the owner. Is this an existing subdivision? This has already been subdivided, right?
No, the plan that's on record at the Registry of Deeds shows the old lot line. Let's see if I can pull that up for you. So this lot line is on the existing plan, but the lot line now cuts across here. It's a very small, I think it's an 11,000 square foot lot on the right, and the rest of it was purchased as open land.
In the meeting, this meeting is being recorded.
The proposal would be that if the application for the single family house is approved by both the planning and zoning boards, we would realign the lot line to, as I mentioned, increase the size of the backyard for the new owners of 208 Center Ave. Mr. and Mrs. Whalen are actually going to live in this house for the next 6 to 12 months while Mr. Kennedy is building the new house. And then when it comes time to renovate the existing house, they'll be moving out. So they'll have a backyard, as will the owner of this backyard.
So the proposed lot line would cut across the existing side yard and then kind of angle out towards the front of the house even more?
Yeah, let me see if I can show you that, Rick. If I have the whole lot shown on a plan, I believe I do. There it is. So that is what the new layout would look like. Okay. So instead of this house rear lot line being approximately here, it's going to be back here. So
No,
they have.
I'm talking about the middle dividing line that will be cutting across the existing side yard of the house.
This right here?
Yep.
That's where the existing lot line is on the plan.
Right.
It's
Okay.
shown. The only part of it we're changing is this rear part.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, why isn't the Whalen's existing house on this plan?
Because it's not the subject of the variance. It is shown right here.
It's the edge of it is shown, but why isn't the whole thing shown?
I'd have to ask Mr. Clapp, who drafted the plan. I'm not sure.
I mean, usually we ask that the abutting properties be shown on plans, but.
Hopefully that's why I added the aerial to our presentation so you could see exactly what we're talking about.
All right. And I know, as you said, this hearing isn't about the proposed house, but what is the side setbacks in this district? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, in the Todd district, they're only 10 feet if it is a commercial, multifamily, or mixed use.
Okay.
If you go to 100% residential, which would, if it was a multifamily or single family or two family, all setbacks become 25 feet. So we could put a commercial building 10 feet off the lot line, but if we want to go residential, it says 25 feet.
Okay. Personally, I don't have a problem with approving this. I would just very, 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 very much ask Mr. Kennedy, take an extra step and make sure that the house looks like it fits in the neighborhood and isn't just basically, vinyl siding and a couple windows. So whatever he can do to make sure it really fits into that, because there's some really interesting architectural homes in that stretch of the road. And I'd love to, he can do whatever he can to make sure that this fits into that neighborhood.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Collins, before I have a few comments, but before I make my comment, I'd like to open this up to Mr. Soper or Mr. Rangel. Would either of you gentlemen like to make a comment at this point?
Well, yeah, if the existing house wasn't what it was, I would be looking at, well, this isn't really the project we were looking for. But to be honest, the fact that they want to restore this house and it was built in 1890, it's also laid out the way they did back in 1890, that I don't have a problem with the second lot being a single family house. I also, not that we can tell them what to build, but I hope it isn't just a raised ranch that, built from the 70s, standing there between these old houses. But I guess I don't have any problems with doing a single family house in this zone, in this particular location.
Mr. Soper, do you have anything?
I don't have anything to really add, other than the project could be a lot larger than it is and have a great impact on the pond out back if it was a larger project.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll make my comment. They'll be brief. I love old barns. It's too bad that the one on the property is dilapidated. I hate to lose them. And maybe I'm seeming like an architect, Mr. Rangel, but I hope if there's anything salvageable from that barn, Mr. Kennedy, that you guys make an effort to salvage something from it, if there's anything of architectural significance. And the other thing is, again, we can't tell you what kind of house to build, but I think Mr. Soper, Mr. Collins, Mr. Rangel, and I would, there's a lot of nice houses in the neighborhood. And, just, again, we can't tell you how to build, what kind of design, but I hope that you'll respect the architecture of the neighborhood and, build something that looks nice, in the neighborhood. We haven't, I'm trying to be objective here, but I like the idea of the old house being preserved because you could tear that down and build some atrocity there, I suppose. And, in Todd districts, they allow a greater density and stuff like that. So there's a lot of options that you have here. But I'm liking what I'm hearing so far. But I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote till we hear the public comment. So at this point, Ms. Shea.
Can I make another comment before that?
Yes, sir, Mr.
And I think we do have some say, being they're looking for a special permit on what this house potentially could look like. A New England style, fit in the neighborhood type of house. I don't know if you have any renderings of what you're proposing. Would be nice to see.
I mean, I only have examples of what he's built in the past, but we can, obviously Jason is listening to everything.
He must have something in mind, I'm sure.
Yeah,
we've talked about a couple of different options, from a colonial, and a raised ranch is definitely one of the options that we had talked about too. It sounds like that would be opposed. And the barn out back is more than dilapidated. The roof's caved in. There's zero salvageable from there.
I'd ask. I'm sorry.
I'm surprised it's still standing.
Which is fine. I like old architecture as well, but this isn't the case to salvage any of that. So, we're trying to do a lot of things here. And when you say not to do vinyl siding, I understand, but there is also construction costs related to it too. We're trying to restore some of the old home. We're going to take this dilapidated barn that's completely unsafe down. There's a lot of work that has to be done as well. So I have to put that into consideration when we're planning on what we're going to build without it being too expensive. Plus construction costs are up like 70% from the beginning of this year. So there's a lot of things to factor in as well when we're designing the home.
Well, I just hope that you, take what we're saying as members of the planning board to heart, because, we have, I understand the cost of lumber and everything else is going crazy. And because we hear this a lot at these meetings that we're at, but, we make these comments with due respect and concern for the town. And we're just asking you to, do what you can within the money that you have to make a nice looking house for the neighborhood.
Understood.
Okay. Ms. Shea, do we have anybody waiting to have public comment?
Where did Liz go?
I'm looking in the Zoom chat room.
Yeah, I see Lee Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Lee Casey. Oh, she's down the bottom down there. What happened to her?
Yeah.
Mrs. Casey is a resident on Park Avenue. I think I'm hearing she wants to speak.
Okay.
So can we open her up? Miss Casey, would you like to speak on this? Could you give us her address, please, too? Could you unmute her?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hi, Miss Casey. This
Hi,
is the
how are
chair
you?
speaking. Could you give us your full name and address, please?
Lee Casey, 18 Park Ave. My
Okay.
land abuts the Wayland's part, Wayland's land on partially the side and the back of the yard. My biggest concern is when this house is built and I have a ditch that comes down. It takes in the drain water from Plymouth Street on, comes into my yard. And throughout the years, it has been filling up and flooding, and both Mr. Wayland has been good trying to clear out the end of it, which is in his property. And I have tried mine, but I'm getting old and I can't do it anymore. But I get flooded at the end of my lot, and I'm worried about the next. So this is going to be the new people moving in. Now we're going to have, it's going to be, so I have 3 houses that I bought on the side. Now this is going to be the 4th house. And if the land is not taken care of all the way down to the grove, the pond, I get flooded. And basically it is not, it always fills up with dirt and everything else. It's not taken care of. It's an easement from the town. It's not taken care of. And I'm worried about, a new house going in and the blockage even getting worse than it is now.
Mr. Riley or Mr. Kennedy, would you care to comment on this, please?
I'm familiar with the ditch that Mrs. Casey's talking about next to her house. I'm not familiar. Lee, does it extend all the way to the pond?
It does, yep.
Okay. Well, it's
And
something. I'm sorry, go
And
ahead.
when we first moved in here, it was quite deep, and now it's just filled in with soil. I had the highway department a couple years ago. I complained throughout the years. The highway department came and basically, while I was at work, they were supposed to be digging the ditch a little bit deeper again, getting out the soil. Instead, they dug it wider. So now it's the same. It's not deep, so it floods my backyard, and I can't mow my lawn till like almost July after the winter. It's all wetland. My yard was never wetland like it is now. And I'm really worried because it goes through Wayland's yard. It's out in the back of his and then goes to the pond. And if it gets blocked by even the new people moving in, not understanding what's going on, I'm the one that's it's just flooding my yard.
Well, I'm assuming, and Jason Kennedy's listening and watching me, so part of the work that we'll be doing out back to remove the old barn will be to replace that area.
I'm sorry, but I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Part of the work that we will be doing is demolishing the old barn building out back behind the Whalen's house and replacing that area with loam and seed. So while we have equipment out there, I'm sure Jason can take a look at that ditch where it crosses the Whalen property, make sure that it is cleared.
Well, everybody promises me things to be done, has not been done, number one.
Yep.
Number two, it's hearsay that you're saying this, then, is it really going to get done? It's just dealing with it.
John, is that actually a drainage easement from the town, or is that?
It's not even, okay, so it's not wet all the time. It's only wet when we have the snow, we have heavy rains. It floods my yard. And it comes all the way from Plymouth Street because the people that live across the street, they have a pool, and when they put their pool in, they were told that the drainage coming through under their thing could actually ruin the pool and everything else. But so there's some sort of piping over under the house across the street on the first house on the on Park Ave. I know that it comes from Plymouth Street, and then other people just drain things in the pond. I've had problems. The other thing is when Brennan's would do snow removal, they would do their back driveway, which is right next to my house, and push all the snow into the ditch, thinking it was just an empty lot. And then I'd have to go out there. I've gone out at midnight, 3 a.m. when people out there doing the snow plowing and pushing it into the ditch. And I'm like, okay, so now there's no place for the water to run off the street because you just filled it up with snow. So I do have a lot of problems living with this wonderful easement that is on my land. And it goes all the way down to the pond, and we'll be now in this new person's yard.
I'm familiar with the Brennan. I think the board's familiar with the Brennan. The Brennan property is about 2 properties away from this property on the corner
Yes,
there.
I have the Brennans, that what used to be the Fernandez. and then Wayland's, and now this will be the fourth one abutting my
Right.
yard. Well, going through, this is not in my yard, but this is where the rest of it goes through his yard, the back of his yard, into the pond.
We can only address what crosses our property, the Whalen property, and it sounds like as you're describing it, whether it's an actual legal recorded easement or not, there is an existing ditch that.
Well, I can show you, when I bought the house, it said the town had an easement on the pond, on that ditch.
Oh, yeah, they might very well on your property. I will have to check to see if
Yes,
there's
but
any.
in order, okay, it did. It went all the way to the pond. I mean, believe me, it did not come down here and flood my whole yard back then.
I don't
It
doubt
went
you whatsoever,
fine.
but what I'm saying is if the town does not maintain it, it only behooves us, the property owners, to maintain it, because if you
No,
maintain your.
I was told years ago it was maintained by the town, and they did used to take care of it, and they stopped.
I can certainly reach out to the DPW director to get more information about it, but what I was about to say was, it behooves us that if you or the town is maintaining the portion of the ditch that's up near your property, up near the Brennan property, and the water is flowing properly, but then only clogs up on the whale, and that causes problems for us. So we need to keep that ditch open. So I'm sure, as alluding to earlier, that when Mr. County has his equipment out there, we'll take a look at that ditch. If it needs to be cleaned out on our property, we'll certainly do that because that helps us.
So if you're saying that it's up to the property owner, then that means if the Waylands sell their unit, their house, and they built this new house in, then no matter what happens, I'm gonna get even worse flooded, because that means those people don't have to do anything to this ditch that goes to the pond.
No, and I'm sorry, through the chair. I'm not saying it's up to the property owner. I'm offering to help it during our renovation work. I used to have a ditch in my backyard, same thing, the town owns the easement, the town's responsible to clean it out. But as neighbors, we would go out and clean it out because frankly, the town doesn't have the manpower to sometimes get to every ditch in town. So there's nothing to prevent a private homeowner from maintaining the ditch, keeping it flowing, getting debris out of there. We will certainly do that.
Well, it's one thing it's one thing if it's just a short distance, but it's quite a ways from the street all the way down to the pond for me to be doing that.
Yes, and again, I can only talk to you about what's on the Whalen property. I can't address anything on the Brennan property or on your property.
Then I'm just saying that's going to be a hardship. That's going to be a hardship on me if this land is put out there and it's not taken care of, not just this year, not just when you put the house in and say, hey, we'll deal with it this year. This is something that's going to be ongoing for as long as whoever owns this house is going to have to deal with. It's like building a street, building an expressway, and all of a sudden you hit a brick wall and there's no place else to go.
Understood, but I hope you understand too, that what we're proposing is only really construction up on the street, 36 feet off of the street, Center Avenue.
But you're saying they own the land, you're saying they own the land all the way down to the pond, which means blockage can happen and no one takes care of it.
I understand. And if you just let me continue, we're not planning to alter that land out back there other than getting rid of pavement in the barn and putting in grass and seed. It's obviously to the homeowner's benefit, meaning the Whalen property and the new homeowner's benefit, to make sure that ditch stays open. That's true of everybody who has a ditch on their property.
You know,
So
because if it blocks before that, they don't even know what's happening. I'm the one that's being flooded.
I understand that, and I completely understand that because I've had issues in different areas, and that's something though I think you have to bring up with the DPW, obviously, because that's upstream from us.
Well, until I know that something's going to be done as far as that goes, that does bother me. Is there anything in the future that could possibly have a house built where the barn is?
No, you'd have to rip down the Whalen's house if you were going to put a new house on that lot in a different location.
Because I know years ago, it was years ago, somebody, what was it? John Walsh had wanted to build something where the barn was years ago. And
Right.
he was almost given the rights to do that, but then he didn't get it. But I just want to make sure nothing's going to become of that land there where the barn is.
Well, as I read in my introduction, that was the deal made between the Whalens and Mr. Kennedy. That all that would be done would be to renovate the existing house and keep that there and to build a single family house next door.
But when you said, I thought this, I read something, or you said something about you could actually put 3 houses in there. How would he do that?
If the Whalens couldn't find anybody to do what Mr. Kennedy's agreeing, the zoning bylaw allows that property to be cut up into 3 commercial lots, or 1 large commercial lot, or 2 commercial lots. You would only need to have, right now they have 189 feet of frontage. Each lot, a new lot, if you wanted to create new commercial lots, only has to be 50 feet wide. So you can fit 3 lots in that same property if you took the old house down.
So commercial places could have, only has to have 50, whereas a house has to have a 90-foot frontage?
It depends on the size of the house, but yes, commercial only has to have a minimum of 50, but it could be larger. Someone could buy the whole lot, the 189 foot.
I thought houses used to be, had to have a 90-foot frontage before.
No, but I don't want to get too deep into it, but there are different frontage requirements and setback requirements for different zoning districts in different parts of the town.
If I could just step in, the Todd districts allow greater density than say an R20, R30, R40. And that was the whole idea of the transit-oriented development district, was to allow greater density, you know, because it was close to the train station. So again, I'm trying not to take sides, but what the proponents are saying, that we could do a lot things that would have a lot denser development. Instead, they're preserving 1 house and just building one single family house at this property. So I hope what Mr. Riley has said, Mr. Casey, and what I've said makes it a little clearer for you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know my main concern is the drainage system going into the pond when somebody else moves in.
Well, thank you for your comments, Mr. Casey. Do we have anyone else who would like to make public comments?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. I'm going to pitch it back to the board for comments before I close this. So does anyone on the board have any further comments on this? Mr. Rangel, Mr. Soper, Mr. Collins?
No.
Okay. So I guess the procedure right now is to close the public hearing.
I'll take your vote.
Okay. So do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make the motion to close the
Someone
hearing.
want to second it?
Second.
All right. Going once, going twice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So now I think we need to have the board vote on this. And to be clear, what we're voting on is for a special permit to build a single family home and to allow and I'm reading from the public hearing notice, and to allow an all residential use in the Todd district under the zoning bylaws. Properties located at 208 Center Street on blah, blah, blah. So would someone like to make a motion to grant this special permit?
I'll make the motion.
So Mr. Rangel has made the motion. Would someone like to second this?
Second.
Okay. Just before we vote on this, again, I would like Ms. Casey's comments noted about the drainage ditch in the record, and so that we could just, reassure that hopefully she won't have any problems. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Motion's been approved.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we turn this back over to Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, public hearing on site plan review, 662 Adams Street.
This is an update, right?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ronald Whitney, my pleasure to be here before you on behalf of Jane and Robert Sullivan. They are the owners of 662 Plymouth Street in the town of Abington. This matter has been before you previously, and I'd like to put the project into perspective. It's a 24,000 square foot lot in the industrial zone. What is being proposed by Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan is that they park roughly 12 trucks on the lot. It is an allowed use in that zone, and it accompanies a use right next door to the property by the McKinnon Contracting Company, whereby they park a number of trucks, relatively similar trucks, the trucks that Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan proposed to park on the property, snow removal trucks. And I know I've elaborated on this before, but just to catch the board up, those trucks will be removed in the snow clearing season, and they will be brought back after the snow clearing season. So these trucks go out on various sites, they remain there for a number of months, and then they come back. There will be virtually no traffic back and forth on and off of the site, except for the movement of the trucks at the beginning of the season off of the site, and the trucks to come back onto the site after the season, the snow clearing season has ended. So it is a fairly straightforward proposal. Now, albeit we got off to a rocky start. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan were working with their neighbors, I should say, Mr. and Mrs. Kearney. They began by removing a great deal of fill. Some of the fill was moved on to the McKinnon property to create a berm on the back of the lot. That was done without a fill permit. Since that time, going back to last September, we did file a request for a fill permit, and we've also filed before you a request for a site plan approval. We're here before you tonight on that request. There has been a site plan prepared by our engineer who joins us tonight, Sean Hardy of Hardy Engineering down in Weymouth. That plan has been sent over for comments to your consulting engineer. I understand that Mr. Hardy has communicated with your consulting engineer, and I think what, from the applicant standpoint, what we would like to achieve tonight is to get some comments back from the board. Up until this point, it has been a matter of the consulting engineer and Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan's engineer talking back and forth, trying to address issues that have been brought to bear. And we have not yet heard from the board what their concerns might be with the site plan. Again, it's a 24,000 square foot lot. There is a house on the front of the property. The use of that house long-term is indeterminate at this point. What we're here before you tonight for is to ask for your approval of the site plan that's been presented. Now, without much further ado, I think what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, is turn it over to our engineer so that he can describe to the board some of the particulars of the site plan that he's prepared. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Hardy.
Good evening. As Attorney Whitney said, I think at the last meeting we were here, or before you guys, we had received some initial comments from the peer review, and we took those, we responded, revised the plan, and resubmitted. The other day, or the end of last week, I guess, we received back some initial comments. I'm not sure it's worth me showing the plan for you guys to screen share, or I don't know if you guys have seen the plan, but basically, as far as the comments go, technical wise, I think I agree with most of them, or at least enough that I think that the technical issues are less kind of in the forefront at this point versus some issues that I think, as Attorney Whitney said, we need some input from the board. Things like the number and the location of the driveways, you know, what, if any, landscape buffers you guys are going to approve or allow the lot coverage issue, knowing that the planning board can give a special permit if it goes over the certain percentage. Those are the types of things I think, at least from me as an engineer's point of view, I kind of need some feedback from the board. Like I said, I agree with most of the comments, or the last round of comments from peer review, or even if I don't necessarily 100% agree with them, if I comply with them, it's not gonna, I don't think, change much in the way of, the stormwater design or things like that. I think they're all relatively easily accomplished things. But those other issues that the board needs, I think we're at that point that without feedback from you guys, I don't know how many times I should be revising the plan if it's not going to meet what you would want it to look like.
Mr. Chairman, can I hop in quick?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that late this afternoon, I received an email from Town Council with an attached letter from an attorney, Whitney. The letter's dated December 28th, and Attorney Whitney writes to Attorney Questle that he represents Robert and James Sullivan, et cetera, et cetera. In my earlier letter, I stated to you that the existing residential home was unoccupied and that Mr. Sullivan has no plans to install a tenant therein. I wish to make you aware that his plans have now changed for the next several months while the site plan process is ongoing. Mr. Sullivan has made plans to let the premises out on a short-term rental basis while the site plan remains ongoing. This is in accordance with the prior use of the premises for over 40 years, which has never been abandoned. I thought it best to keep you aware of his intentions. The board was CC'd on this letter. I think the thrust of it belongs down with the building department, but I wanted you to be aware that we did, in fact, the board did in fact receive this. And I also wanted you to be aware, Mr. Hardy just referenced a special permit, that the board can grant a special permit for lot coverage. And this office has not received any special permit application. So I just wanted you to be aware of those two things before we proceed. And also to let you know, Mike Peralta is here. I'm not sure if you've seen him. There are a lot of people in the meeting, but he is here to respond to his report.
Thank you, Liz. And I think as far as the special permit for lot coverage was a question really what we needed to do. So I think the question. Perhaps the thing to do is to go to Mike Peralta and have him comment on it, and then the board will come. Mike, if you're there.
Yes, I am. Good evening. It's good to see some familiar faces after all these years.
Good to see you, Mike.
The first review letter that that PMP Associates prepared, some of the items were addressed. The design engineer and I did have conversations in regards to some of the issues, and the plan was resubmitted and re-reviewed. There are three critical things that need to be discussed. The property owner added a second driveway, which is not allowed with the dimensions for this property. And I had asked for some reasoning of why this needed to have a second driveway. And I was told that the property owner just wants to put some trucks out there and in season, drive them off to a site while they can remove snow. And then at the end of the snow season, come back. There doesn't appear to be any justification whatsoever of why they would need two driveways on this property, considering that we were told the property owner is going to drive to the site, remove the trucks, and that he'll be coming in and going out, the person coming in and going out. So they don't need two driveways. And then that results into the reasoning for the lot coverage. If you don't put the second driveway in, you reduce the lot coverage. The lot coverage, I believe I've got the numbers in there, greatly exceed the 60% of what is allowed on a property. So this is overpaved. Then the other issue has to deal with the existing driveway being widened and making the driveway non-conforming, putting it within several feet of the property line instead of keeping it 10 feet off the property line. So there's comments in regards to that. And then the last of the comments has to deal with the fact that the parking lot for the trucks by zoning is supposed to be paved. And when you have vehicles that use hydraulics and that are parked for long periods of time, there's a strong probability that you will have a discharge of hydrocarbon materials. The land up there, the soils are very good, well-drained soils. So anything that would go onto an open gravel parking lot would most likely, even though it's compacted with the trucks, will seep through it going into the ground. So paved surface is more than appropriate, because this way here, if there is a spillage, that will go into the deep sump hooded catch basins where it'll be caught and can be easily removed before it gets into the ground. So there were 3 items, and I think I made a recommendation in the letter that suggested that, well, now is not the time to make a formal vote on this. And as Mr. Attorney Whitty had requested, it's probably wise to give some guidance as to whether or not the board would consider allowing the second driveway to remain, the one that was built without a permit, that would have to come off. And the location of the modifications for the existing driveway to keep that off the property line. And third, to have the parking area paved. Now, one other thing that is in the letter was that the determination of the use of the property has to be spelled out in order to technically evaluate the parking loading requirements. The house is, we're told, is not occupied as a residential home. And now Liz just noted that, well, they're going to use it. So whether they're going to use it or not use it, the potential is always there to use that house. So therefore, a site plan before the board needs to reflect the fact that there was a single family home there that has a potential use of either single family home or maybe another use, but it has to be spelled out in order to have parking areas designated for the house use over and above the parking of trucks in the rear. So those are the key takeaway points that I have, and I'm answer any questions on any of the other comments that the board may have.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Bruce.
Yeah, as a public comment, as a board comment, I read Mr. Peralt's letter, and Attorney Whitty, proponents, I was very disturbed when I read that the proponent has gone ahead without getting the proper permits and done construction work and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, without commenting, but you're an experienced land use attorney. I was very disappointed that your client went ahead and did this sort of work. And I wondered if you could comment on that, please.
Yes, I'd be glad to. Mr. Sullivan came to me after he had received certain letters of enforcement from the town. Long after he had done the excavation work and long after he had gone forward with his plans. He admits that that was the wrong approach. He doesn't offer excuses for it. We're here. He engaged my services sometime late August of last year, and we immediately filed for the fill permit, filed for the site plan review. It was not the correct approach, but nonetheless, when we look at the property, the proposed use of the property, it's in the context of what is allowed by the town of Abington zoning bylaw. And so we're going at it ass backwards, if you will. But here we are months later, and there's no other course that we can take except to try to move forward in good faith. Mr. Sullivan has hired an engineer. He's hired my services, retained me, and we've been before your board 4 or 5 times. Our engineer has made changes to the plan as far as those issues that are brought to bear by Mr. Peralt, who it's nice to see as well, Mike, after all these years. Those issues, I think, are best addressed by the engineer and by Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, who is online, I believe, would be more than happy to speak to the board as far as the need for a second entrance and the need for the driveway into the lot to be a sufficient size so that he can use it as intended. Again, the intentions are to use the lot almost in exactly the same vein as the lot is next door that's been used for years and years by the McKinnon Company, with much less intensity, I should say, because of the fact that the equipment doesn't move daily. It doesn't move weekly or monthly. It moves 2 times a year. It moves in and it moves off. There might be some activity where he's there repairing and working on the vehicles in the off season, but the intensity of the use is very low. What drives this to become perhaps more than it is number one, the approach, admittedly, and number 2, the fact that the neighbors to the south, the Kearneys, who I believe are with us tonight, and they've spoken at prior meetings and will speak again tonight, I'm sure, were working cooperatively with Mr. Sullivan. And in fact, they removed hundreds of yards of fill from their property, as well did Mr. Sullivan remove it from his property. And their work was done without a permit, and the McKinnon's work was done without a permit. And admittedly, I mean, make no excuses, the Sullivan's work was done without the appropriate relief from this board or any other board in town. So we're making up ground. We're here in good faith to listen to the board's comments and to try to right the ship and move forward. Mr. Sullivan wants to be a good neighbor. He wants to be a taxpayer. He wants to hire and retain people to work in his business in the town of Abington. And I just ask that you give him a shot.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. Any other comments from the board? Yes.
A few things here. First, when we have cease and desist orders, does it apply to the entire property or just parts of it?
Is that a question for me?
I'll ask it either to our board, or if you want to tackle that, that's fine too.
I'll let the board discuss it.
I'm sure it applies to the whole property.
Okay, so we still have an existing cease and desist on the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay, then as far as I'm concerned, there is no residential use because the entire property is under a cease and desist. And it has been for many months, I will add. And this is one issue where I'll take up with Mr. Whitney in recounting the history, where there's more than one problem of just simply doing some work. It was ignoring multiple requests to come in front of us and other boards to discuss what was happening on the property and ignoring other cease and desist letters from the town over the past year. So it wasn't just a matter of, oops, we made some improvements and now we're coming back in front of the board. It was ignoring multiple pieces of correspondence from the town about what was happening up there. So I want to make sure that's on the record, that this is why this is now an issue. And if I'm wrong, someone can correct me, but I think this is the bigger issue.
Yes, I would agree with you, but I just don't see why we need to go. And I understand it's been brought up in other meetings that we've had with them, and I've been very clear on it. And I understand it. We can rehash it, but I think we've got to go forward at this point, and that would be my intention. Liz, did you want to say something?
Nope.
But, and certainly the situation now, after we've been told that there wouldn't be anybody in that house and that it was vacant and it wouldn't be reoccupied, I think that's something that town council needs to address, perhaps with a letter that was written to them. For one, I would be opposed to all of a sudden having tenants in that house until the whole problem is solved. But that's just one person on the board. But I think legal has to answer that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll move forward at this point, but when we're talking about the history of all this, I just wanted to make sure that was brought up as well.
Yes, I think that's perfectly clear. There's no question.
So,
I think Mr. Whitney would agree with you.
Yes,
so
I would.
regarding the driveways, is there a reason why the second one is needed? Did I miss this as part of the discussion?
As far as PMP is concerned, and I would think that there's only need of one driveway in this particular situation. I, as one member, think one driveway is sufficient, and to put two in there, it's not appropriate.
Okay. And in regards to the rest of it, I think Mr. Whitney was looking for some guidance. My personal point of view is I don't disagree with anything in the PMP letter, I guess. And in regards to the boundaries, especially with the neighbors, I would certainly expect more steps taken to shield the neighbors from the activity on the site, even though maybe the trucks or vehicles sit there for 6 months. I have a feeling there's going to be some work and activity in the off months. Whatever can be done to provide shielding and borders and noise suppression and everything else from the neighbors is how I would expect it to go. This absolutely is an acceptable use, but there are ways that this has to happen. So that would be my my 2 cents here.
Thank you. Any other board members? Whether that answers your question to some degree, Mr. Hardy, I think that, the one driveway is probably something that we're going to require, just one driveway, and certainly need a buffer zone between the residential area and the building. And perhaps you have some questions, or Mr. Kowal can answer some more.
Well, I guess I hear and understand the number of driveways. The buffer zone, so there is a substantially tall stockade fence along that lot line. Certainly shields it from view. I know that the way the bylaw is written, it says that you can have have that fence and then a buffer zone that's acceptable, I guess, to the board is that's a paraphrase of how it's worded, but that's generally how it's worded. So I guess a little guidance as far as, width of that and location of that would be a welcome, a welcome input from you guys. I know currently we tried to propose, we were closer to, on the driveway going in, we were proposing to make sure that that's a 5 foot, and we're proposing lumen seed, because with the understanding, if there's anything inside of that vinyl fence that is on the property line, that it's really not going to do anything for the abutters. They're not going to be able to really see it, so to speak. So that's why we're, hesitant to go crazy modifying things without hearing from you guys as a board.
May I, Mr. Chairman, as a suggestion to the board and to the Kearneys, the neighbors, Mr. Sullivan would be willing to pay for the cost of planting arborvitaes on his side of that fence if he wished to have those installed. I don't know if the board is completely aware of the existing conditions, but there is a 6 foot fence that goes along the side of Mr. Kearney's property across the back and then down further towards the rear of Mr. Sullivan's property. And he would be, Mr. Sullivan would be more than happy to pay the cost of installing perhaps some 6, 8, 10-foot arborvitae's on that fence. But because of the way the existing conditions are, the fence is bounded at the base of it by concrete blocks on Mr. Sullivan's side of the fence. So it doesn't allow for any planting area of any size and dimension. And so it would probably provide a nice backdrop for the Kearneys if they were interested. I thought that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta, something you want to, if you think we've covered, is there something we need to specify that we haven't talked about? We could put Mike Peralta on. Kevin.
Who are we looking to bring in?
Mike
Peralta.
Okay.
Let Michael speak, Darius.
There we go.
All right, gentlemen,
Chairman,
it takes a bit for it to unmute, so
yeah.
Apologies for the delay.
Well, thank you. The big thing is that the current driveway is 10 foot off the property line, and zoning requires the driveways to be 10 foot off the property line. What is being proposed is the driveway is going to be put 5 foot off the property line and leaving a 5-foot strip for lumen seed. So the comment that I represented to the board was that you have room on the house side of the driveway to do your driveway widening, which then would afford the 10-foot required strip between the paved driveway and the Kearney residence. So at least in that case there's a little more room to do plantings, if you will, or to keep it landscape, or just keep the trucks from being right on the edge of the lot. So to keep it in conforming with zoning, and therefore not requiring the board to have to provide relief at zoning requirement. So you're making it not any more non-conforming by holding the 10 foot. So that is the big thing with the driveway. In the rear of the property, they're putting stockade fences up. Again, they've got block walls and things back there. I'm not sure what they can do on that for any other type of screening for that, unless they plan on moving the trucks away from that property line. But we don't have a parking plan on the site plan yet to show us where they're actually physically going to put the trucks. There's no spaces designated.
Well, I did show that on the revised plan. I mean, I think I can share the plan and show you guys maybe a little bit, but
yeah.
Please do.
So this was the plan. I'll zoom in on the proposed, I guess. So we're showing along the back and down this other sideline. So we'll call it the west and the north. That's where we're proposing the truck parking. We have 2 proposed parking spaces in front of the existing garage. So we have areas that are kind of delineated for the parking, but again, at the time, because of the use isn't identified in the parking table. Its use solely exists for the storage of these vehicles. So we didn't delineate necessarily specific number of parking spaces, but Mr. Sullivan is committed to parking his vehicles in this area that we do show on the plan, and as well as any, cars or something that can be parked in front of the garage as well as inside the garage. So that is the intent currently, as far as for the parking goes. And this, as we said, so along this whole lot line, and it's hard to see because there's 3 different lines that are here. There's a property line, a fence line, and then this concrete kind of block wall that comes down this sideline across here. It ends, but then the fence continues down on this property line as well. So that's that 8-foot high stockade fence that we're talking about that separates those 2 lots. any landscaping, you know, if it's done certainly behind an 8-foot high fence, no one's really going to see it, whether or not, if the Kearneys wanted to have something on their side of the fence, I think Mr. Attorney Whitney just said that that would be something that would be in play as far as from our client.
So there was one item that about the lot coverage. If you eliminate the second driveway, that will reduce the driveway coverage. But with the trucks being parked along the rear and the northern property line, what is the reasoning to pave the entire rear of that lot?
There isn't any.
Because, you know, the board sees site plans constantly, whereas there's parking, there's driveway aisles, there's maneuverability, there's the ability to bring fire trucks in on site. In this case here, the entire rear of this property is being paved. So the comment that my office made was basically, you need to reduce the coverage down to zoning. But in this case here, you also need to kind of justify why you have to have that total area paved.
Can I interrupt? Where is the pavement called? I see gravel area for open lot temporary truck storage, but I don't see pavement mentioned.
That needs to be paved by zoning.
By zoning.
Well, I think zoning also allows or other hard surface. So that's, again, one of the questions that we're asking.
Well, and that, if you recall what I had said earlier, was that the reasoning for the pavement is because you have these vehicles parked out there, and because there is a stronger potential to have seep out of these trucks, that the pavement will at least give you some protection so it can travel, if it rains, to the deep sump hooded catch basin and deep sump hooded manhole to have these floatables captured and removed instead of slipping directly into the ground.
I would agree.
I guess I'm not following. I'm sorry. I see. I understand paving underneath where the trucks, where it says truck parking, but they're not proposing to pave the back site at all. The whole back lot doesn't show paved, just shows gravel.
They weren't proposing to do any pavement back there.
You say none. Okay. Yeah. All right. I have it. Okay. I saw that.
I would agree with that. If it's just for open lot storage, we need to know what's the amount being stored there and limit the amount of pavement and area that can be drived on. Hence, like Mike said, conform to zoning or improve it.
Could I ask another question if I could? The trucks are being picked up, but where do the drivers park their cars that are coming to drive these vehicles out?
You can understand why I like these things.
I think the intent was to store them there, which would mean to me just parking them there, and then in the wintertime they go off site somewhere.
Yeah, it's not as if the truck drivers come in for the day, park their vehicles and take the truck. The trucks go out for the season. They don't come back until the end of the season.
Oh, they're at the job sites wherever they're at. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked that same question, and I was told that it's the owner is basically going to be doing the ferrying of the trucks. He'll come to the site, pick up a truck, and deliver the truck to where it's going to go, and then he'll come back and he'll ferry out another one. So it's not like there's a fleet of manpower. It's all being done by the property owner. And that's why the comments about there is no need to have multiple driveways if it's only one person coming to the property and one at a time removing the vehicles and sending them out.
All right. Mr. Hardy, are you left with more questions, or do you? Oh, you've been muted. Once you hit mute, you have to be asked to be unmuted again.
Sorry about that. As you heard, my daughter was going to bed, so I needed a panic mute. I think I get the general gist, and those were the types of feedback that I needed. You know, again, there is some latitude that the bylaw allows, and I think we're hearing that the board wants us to meet these requirements, so that points me in that direction. You know, if you're telling us that you're not going to approve the second driveway, and you're telling us you're not going to approve anything over the lot coverage, then that certainly shapes what needs to be done. I do note that my client would prefer not to pave it, but I don't know whether you guys will entertain that or not.
I wonder if I may say something else, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to if we're going to get down to one driveway, and I hear the comments from the board, and I'm going to address that with my client. Would the board consider the 5-foot setback to allow for a larger driveway, the existing driveway? The reason I ask that is because it appears to be allowed under 175-66. It calls for a buffer strip, but it says or a natural growth of trees, or a double row of evergreen trees, or a solid screen type fence 6 feet in height. And there is a 6-foot high fence there. And if we're going to be trimmed down to one driveway, I would just ask the board to consider the widest driveway possible. There are some fairly good sized machines that Mr. Sullivan will be taking on and off the property. It would certainly make it more plausible for him to get in and out without trying to clip curbings and anything that might be on either side of the driveway. So just ask the board to consider a 5-foot buffer there going into the first driveway on the southerly side.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I took a look at that as part of the review. If you look at the site plan, the second driveway was basically from the face of the building to the property line, and was at the pinch point was 12 and a half feet. On the side where the existing driveway is, and looking at that, if you hold the existing driveway and you want to make it 15 foot wide, you have room to the house to expand that driveway and not have to violate the 10-foot wide buffer. So there is room to put in the wider driveway. It's just, instead of building it towards the abutter, you build it back towards the house. And if it was acceptable to the property owner to have that second driveway up to the face of the house, this is not going to be any more intrusive on this side where the existing driveway is, in order to make it get to the rear.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that, in that I'm looking at a Google shot of a very small dump truck in the driveway that we're talking about, and it barely fits in there. But I also see that we want to have a buffer strip with the neighbors. I think Mike's recommendation, if the owner can do that, Mr. Sullivan can bring that driveway closer to the house, then if they had that with a better driveway, because this is just a residential driveway that he's moving big trucks on top of. So if they're going to repave a driveway and move it closer to the house, I think that makes all the sense in the world.
Mr. Chairman, I just got a text from Mr. Sullivan, the owner. He is logged in. He's under the name Jane Tudgy. He's got someone else's phone. So if you wanted to unmute him, he might be able to also weigh in on some of this.
So that's under Jane Tudgy.
Yes.
So if you can release that.
Yeah, all set. You should be in any second here.
You're muted. You can come on now, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan?
Not.
Oh, you're back on mute again. You can speak now, Mr. Sullivan. We should be able to hear you.
You may be having technical difficulties with the audio.
Mr. Sullivan, we have Jane Trucci unmuted, and it must be, we're not receiving anything from you. So perhaps if you could, call your attorney and and probably relay whatever message you want to relay, that would be fine.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan can also call in. I'll just keep my eye out for his coming into the meeting.
Okay, fine. Mr. Sullivan, if you heard that, you could make that phone call. In the meantime, is there any other comments anybody needs to make from the board? I can open up to the public if the public has something to say, and I would go to Liz and see who might be waiting.
You have Michelle Carney waiting, and then after her is Patrick Carney.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Carney. 652 Adams Street. I just wanted to make a quick comment that, well, first of all, there is a movement there daily. But I also wanted to speak on the importance of the buffer strips, because we have dogs, and our dog pen is actually in the corner along the driveway. It's been there for 10, 12 years. And along the driveway, there's a small gap under the fence, probably a couple inches. And Mr. Sullivan likes to harass myself and my dogs when I bring them out. He barks at them. He bangs on the fence. He makes comments about certain people eating dogs. It's just very scary. He sprays the hose at them. And then along the other fence where there's concrete blocks, there's also a small gap, a few inches. And there's the concrete blocks, and then there's a ditch that's not filled in. So, I mean, God forbid one of them somehow dug a hole or got stuck, they would get stuck in that ditch. So, I don't know. The buffer strips are really important to me because those are my children. There's never been any issues with the dog pen. It's been there for as long as we've had the dog. So that's pretty much all I got.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Liz.
Yep, the next one would be Patrick Carney.
Carney.
Yeah. So in just a minute, I'm going to cue you in.
We need to unmute Mr. Kearney.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just a couple things. Mr. Hardy had mentioned that he was looking for a little bit of guidance from the board about, what they're looking for. Well, all he's going to do is read the zoning bylaws 175-66 about buffer strips. And the only two sides of the lot where Mr. Sullivan did put fence are the two sides where the big square lot is. The fence along the driveway is my fence, and I'm actually thinking about taking it down because due to the adversarial relationship with Mr. Sullivan, I have no way of cleaning my fence. He will not allow me on the property to do so. So there's really no sense me keeping a fence up there, and maybe he can put his own fence up along with the arborvitae he wants to plant. Now, my issue is I'm a residential property. He's an industrial. I know that Mr. Pearl said there's supposed to be a 10-foot strip landscaped as a buffer between me and his driveway.
but I read the zoning bylaws as there's supposed to be a 20-foot buffer strip on all sides. It's very plainly worded.
Hold on.
So, you know, like we've said before, the buffer strips is the big thing because we can't get along with Mr. Sullivan, very belligerent person, as you've all experienced dealing with him through this process. So that's my big thing. And the fact that he put the stones to raise his grade against my property, it's not my problem. The fact that his lot only has 73 feet of frontage, it's supposed to have 90. That's not my problem. The fact that he's really supposed to have a 24-foot wide driveway on his side of the house plus the 10-foot strip, and he doesn't have the dimensions to do it, that's not my problem. You know, Mr. Whitney said, yes, they charged in full speed. They went ahead and did all this work. It wasn't unknowingly. It wasn't unknowingly at all. He knew what he was doing, and he just doesn't care how he affects his neighbors. So I would like for them to use that second driveway on the other side of the house so that he's not bringing his trucks by my bedroom windows every time he enters the property. Because aside from the plow trucks, everything else he drives is a big diesel. He's got a big rack truck. He's got a big utility truck, and he's got friends that come by with big diesels, and they go right by my bedroom window, you know, and there has to be some sort of buffer between me and him to allow us to have peaceful enjoyment of our backyard while he runs his business.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just say briefly, it's a little bit disingenuous on the part of Mr. Kearney to suggest that my client went forward without the permits and so forth. My client admits that. Perhaps Mr. Kearney could admit that he did the same thing, that he removed 900 yards of fill with no permits. And as long as he was getting along with Mr. Sullivan was doing all the work, everything was fine and dandy. And now he's got a big issue with it. I understand that we have to address these issues. We're here to address these issues. I've got my client on the line, and he would like to speak to the board if he may.
May I respond, Mr. Whitney?
No, we won't get this back and forth. I've heard all of this before, and we'll address that later. Mr. Sullivan, he wants to talk to you.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Sullivan. Yes, go ahead.
I'm just going to lower the computer so I don't have an echo. Okay. I got to go further. There we go. Okay. The allegations of spraying the fence, picking the fence, the dogs, these are blatant lies. I come into that property on a daily basis in my personal vehicle. It may be a rack truck, it may be a service body, it may be a pickup truck, it may be my utility expedition SUV, small SUV. I don't know what I'm driving on any given day, but I can tell you that my large trucks are off the property. Employees or drivers do not come to the property to drive them off the property. They've all been stationed at their locations. The drivers go to that location, and that's where they are. I do get visited by friends. Yes, I do. I haven't been there very much, I would say, in the last month, but I do show up and I do keep up on the property. The need for the second driveway for me is to separate the house use from out back. If they're on the right-hand side of the property or the northerly border, that's where they are, that's where they stay, and they'll never come over to the other side. There'll never be an issue. I can understand, and I can probably give one driveway and keep them over between the garage and the house, if that's what we need to do. But I find it very disingenuous. I've kept my mouth shut for the most part during this whole endeavor. Did we know about the permitting? No. Was it brought to our attention? Yes. And as the attorney Whitney said, Mr. Kearney had agreed to have dirt removed at my expense, a large expense, and he was okay with it until the relationship degraded. And now it is what it is now. I have placed a formal complaint with the planning board, and I truly hope that they expend the same energy that you are with me towards Mr. Kearney.
We recently received that complaint, and his taken care of, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Thank you.
Are there any other people that would like to speak, Liz?
No.
Well, I'm having difficulty on hearing.
Somebody spoke and I missed.
Do you wish to say anything further, Mr. Sullivan?
No, I'm open to respond to any questions that might be directed my way.
Okay. I'll leave you online, but for now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sullivan has made his comments.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where we go from here. Obviously, I hope, Mr. Hardy, I think we've sort of given you some of our ideas and everything else. It would seem to me that the only thing to do is to continue this hearing for another month or 2 months if it's going to take that long. And through Liz Shea, if you could get back to her with something, and we can go back and forth with you and PMP to try to come to some arrangement on this. There's no question, and I understand having the trucks parked. There's no question in my mind that they need to be parked on asphalt. I know there's gravel. I'm not quite sure what the arrangement would be if gravel remained, but that nothing was parked on the gravel. I'm not quite sure how we make sure that happens. But that's something to take into consideration with the lot coverage. It's difficult in my mind to have a residential house on this property and also to have equipment on this property. I would more understand it if it was an office or something that was related to the business, but it's almost like we have two uses on this property. And that's the thing that concerns me. Obviously, if the house was removed or moved to some other place and there was a parking area for your equipment, that'd be one thing. But it seems like we're trying to do two things at once, and the configuration of the lot to start with is not conducive to what it seems that you would like to do there. And I just think.
Who's speaking, Ron?
Wayne Smith is speaking.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
So perhaps you want to comment on what I just said. That's fine. And the other board members may totally disagree with me. I'm just speaking as one member.
I would just make a short comment, Mr. Chairman, and that is my letter speaks for itself. I did feel it appropriate to send it to town council because it was something that was different than what I had previously written to town council. It's Mr. Sullivan's intentions right now that if the residential use were to continue after this site plan has been approved, it would require zoning relief in order to do so. It would be a mixed use. So in other words, if this site plan is approved, what will happen is Mr. Sullivan will go about his business and operate his business from that site. If he intends in the future to use the house long-term, and I did make a note in the letter that was read earlier in the meeting by Ms. Shea, that it was a short-term proposition while this site plan review process was unwielding, that there would be a tenant in the house. The genesis of all of that is that Mr. Sullivan has an employee who was essentially homeless. He's got a house sitting there. The property is not being used for the use that we come before you, proposed use that we come before you here tonight. He felt, well, why don't I just give this guy a hand, put him in the house for 2 or 3 months while this process unfolds. Hopefully we get the site plan approved at some point, so 30 to 60 days from now. Then decision is made, do we go forward and continue to use the house? If that's the case, we understand full well that we have to come back and ask for zoning relief in order to do so.
And it wasn't making any criticism. I was appreciative of the fact that you notified town council, because obviously, you know what can be done. It's quite appreciate that. Bruce, you had a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, hi, Bruce again, Bruce Hughes. I'm reading Mike Peralt, PMP, Mr. Peralt's letter of the 29th, and, I don't see how we can go forward. I'm echoing what you said. I don't see how we could, I think we need to continue this. There's just too many things that need to be addressed in this, 6-page letter from Mr. Peralt before we could even consider approving this. We really need for Mr. Peralt to sit down with Mr. Hardy and Mr. Attorney Whitney and the proponent and work these things out. And, take 2 months or something to do this, to get this straightened out, and then bring it before us. That's just my comment.
Well, we appreciate your comments from each one of the board members. It's helpful to us to hear from you. In our previous meetings, not through any fault of the board, but just the process as it was in getting the site plan prepared and getting it to the consulting engineer. There wasn't a lot of time devoted to getting feedback from the board. So having heard from the board tonight, I find that most constructive, and it's going to allow myself, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Hardy to come back to the board 30 or 60 days, whatever the will of the board is. I might suggest that 60 days would be the appropriate time period, given the concerns that have been raised by Mr. Peralt and the means by which we will address those in a final site plan that would be brought before you 60 days from now, hopefully for your vote. If it's the will of the board for a 60-day, we would appreciate that.
I would suggest to the board that we continue the hearing until March 1st. That sounds agreeable. Someone would like to make that motion.
I'll make that motion. Do we continue the hearing to March 1st planning board meeting?
Do we have a second?
Second it.
Motion's been made and second. Any further discussion from the board? Being no further discussion, we'll continue the meeting to March 1st. And I want to thank you all for all your input tonight. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
I think I did get a vote on that.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Okay, it's doing it. I made the motion.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? No one was opposed. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I get confused once in a while. Moving on.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mike. Thanks.
Mike, good seeing you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
On the schedule for, I'll do that in a moment. I'll get back to something else. The Abington Planning Board requirements for application submission that you all have seen in front of you. And then also on the schedule of meetings for the rest of this year. I would suggest that on the September 7 or 13 that we make it the 7th, the day after New Year's, if that's okay with everybody. Everybody agree with that?
What was the date again?
September 7th?
7th or 13th.
Oh, okay.
To make it the 7th, is that doable for everybody?
Good.
So that would be a Tuesday night, right?
That's correct.
Is everybody okay with that?
It's a long ways away, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we want to do with July 6th or 12th. I guess July 6th because it's close to the 4th, or July 12th, whichever one.
That's the same situation, either the Tuesday or the following Monday.
So, yeah, because the 4th is on a Sunday, so Monday's a holiday, so it would be.
Let's do it on the 12th.
Do it on the 12th? Is that okay with everybody?
12th is fine with me.
All right, we'll do it on the 12th. All right, and that, so on the schedule, all those in favor of the schedule as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
As amended, yeah.
Okay, great. And then the schedule follows. It'll be worked out on the requirements for application submission that Liz had.
Did we lose Rick?
Did we lose who?
Rick?
Oh, he's there.
No, he's right here.
Oh, all
Hey,
right.
Rick.
I just don't see him.
He's here.
Okay.
I see him. I'm comparing beards with him. Yeah.
All right.
How am I whiter than you?
Yes, he is, without a mask.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's right. That's the great thing about these meetings. We can see each other. All our handsome faces, but we don't see Ms. Shea's beautiful face here. Oh, is that
No,
sexist?
sorry. My desktop doesn't have a camera.
Well, can we spend $500 and buy her a computer so we can see her at these?
Sorry, not sorry.
You can't see all the hand gestures.
I'm glad to see Mr. Riley's not wearing his mask.
Everybody be quiet, please. Sean, on the Veterans Place, would you go ahead on that? The letter that you all have in front of you.
Sure. This is a follow-up to discussion from October 5th at your meeting regarding some of the finishing details for Veterans Place. This is Belcher Street and Cook Way off of Plymouth Street. There was basically two outstanding issues that we had discussed. One was making sure that the swales were working properly. And at the time of our October 5th meeting, SEA, and some of Egan Development's contractors had gone in and tried to fine tune the swales, but they hadn't been tested because we didn't have much rain in August, September. So when we got to the October 5th meeting, we couldn't really say that we tested them. We showed that the updates and improvement had worked. And as luck would have it, soon thereafter, there was two pretty heavy rain events in Abington on, I think it was the 14th and 16th, something like that. Let's see, 14th and 17th. And so Mr. Egan had gone out and taken a photo of 3 different areas of the swale 24 hours after the first rain event, and then 48 hours after the first rain event, and then did it again a couple days later when there was another 1.91 inches. Took 24-hour and 48-hour photos, which I submitted them all to you. And I think it shows that the swales are working. The concern was in the past, the contours weren't working perfectly enough, that water wasn't getting as far down the swale as it needed to. So it was starting to gather and was lingering longer than 72 hours. These photos show that essentially the water is gone within 48 hours. And that is with a rainstorm of 1.1 inches, I believe, on the 14th and 1.9 on the 17th. So kind of back to back. Sorry, 1.21 on the 14th and 1.91 on the 17th. Recently had another heavy rain. I think it was before New Year's or New Year's Eve or whatever. And I hadn't heard any negative feedback from that. So the October 5th discussion was, how can we kind of make sure that this is taken care of if it's not working right? And we said that we would put up a $10,000 bond until we knew that it was tested and was working. Well, I offer you photographic evidence to show that apparently they are working as intended. So I'm asking for a vote to confirm that agreement and that we don't need to put aside a $10,000 bond between now and May to basically confirm yet again that the swales appear to be working fine. Second to that was just an update that you asked me to confirm in writing that we would try one more attempt at adding some drainage improvements onto the private way called Carriage Hill Drive at Egan Development's expense and under the supervision of John Stone, if we could get all of the owners of that Carriage Hill to give us that approval. And we would try to do that this coming spring so the work could be done in the spring, summer of 2021.
Yeah, on that, Sean, just if you are unable to do that with the neighbors, I think that somehow or other, whether it's myself or someone from the board, should actually speak with these neighbors and sort of tell them what's in their best interest. And they may, if for some reason, whatever that reason is, that they don't want, I mean, they for lack of a better term, don't trust you or Egan Development on it. But that goes on. But I mean, that would be the thing. I don't know, but I would want them to be understand perfectly clear that this is in their best interest. And sometimes they might have that feeling that they're trying to get railroaded into something, which they certainly aren't. It's an expense to the developer, and it's in their best interest, but you never know what people are thinking. And I hope.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you suggesting that we should send a letter out to the neighbors?
It'd be fine for us to send a letter to the neighbors, if necessary, a letter or verbally, or go and talk to them, because I just don't know. I have no reason to believe they have a problem with them. I know 2 of them wanted to sell the house and they thought it was going to affect the sale of the house. At the same time, they complain about the water. I don't know how to answer those questions. I mean, it almost needs, you need someone to really explain it to them that has basically, I mean, we have an interest, but they're the ones that are living there and it's in their best interest.
Yeah, I do believe that those 2 houses were in fact sold. So now we have new homeowners that will have to kind of educate and update what the purpose of, what we're trying to do. I do have one friend who lives in that neighborhood that I can try to reach out to again. I don't think and we'd have to hear back from everyone. We'll do our best to make this happen. We'll CC the board when we send our letter out. Or, I mean, whatever you guys would like me to do. If you want me to draft a letter and show you before it goes out, so that if you wanted to add a second letter into the envelope, that's fine too.
Is that what the board would like to have us do or not?
On the back of a nice Abington postcard.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was something short and simple that said the Abington, Planning Board has reviewed Egan Development's letter, and we would strongly suggest that you cooperate and assent because this is in your best interest and at no cost to you. Something simple like that.
And the truth of the matter is, they own the law. They own the road. I'm not even sure they understand that. It's important that the town still plows it, which theoretically, whether they should or they shouldn't, it always becomes a matter of contention. And the point of it is, when the road goes or anything else, it's their responsibility to maintain it. And this is in their best interest, because the more water that goes over the road improperly, the quicker that road's going to deteriorate. And they own the road. They own to the center of the road. When the time comes it needs to be repaired, I don't know what's the situation. Go ahead.
Well, why don't I try to meet with Mr. Egan and draft a letter, and I'll submit a draft to your board, hopefully, within the next month or 2. So you'll have some time to review it and approve it, and then we can perhaps send the letters out in, say, April or May. We wouldn't start any work till, the spring weather clears. So I'm assuming we wouldn't start till June, July, August.
Okay. On the $10,000 bond, what is the board's pleasure? Do you want to release the $10,000 bond at this point and have a vote for that?
$10,000 bond?
Yes.
It's a request of a vote not to require it.
Okay.
You hadn't presented it yet. Okay.
I'll make that motion not to require the $10,000 bond.
Motion made.
Seconded.
Seconded. Any further discussion?
Have we had superintendent of DPW weigh in on this at all, since the town now owns this stuff?
The swales particularly, I don't know. I don't know if I sent a copy of this letter. I don't see that I CC'd John, but I know he's aware of it. He's been obviously pretty good that if he sees an issue, he calls us and lets us know, or calls Mr. Egan. And Mr. Egan has been going out after rainstorms and not only looking at the swales, but looking at the Carriage Hill to see if there's any signs of problems. But I have not heard any reports from DPW that they had any concerns.
So I went out there after one of those rainstorms, and there was a good amount of water by the drains where the rocks are piled up there. I mean, it was 9 inches deep in some spots. But I without hearing from the superintendent of DPW, if he's happy with how things are looking, I can't support that. Sorry.
I don't mind if you want to push this off a month. We can do that. This is not incredibly time sensitive. That's fine.
What Rick just said makes sense. Yeah, maybe we should push this off a month till we hear from John Stone.
Okay. So we'll get in touch, Liz, get in touch with John Stone and make sure it's under his, he agrees with this, and then we'll have a vote at the next meeting.
Thank you.
And I apologize. I'll forward a copy of my letter to John, so when Liz reaches out, John will at least have it somewhere in his inbox.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Do we have anything else to bring up at this meeting? I can't even find my papers, and I got more space here than I have in the meeting.
I just wanted to let the board know that at the request, a letter went to James McKinnon, who lives to the right of 662 Adams Street, about the 500 dads of fill that was brought onto their property. And an additional letter went out today to the Kearneys, who live to the left of 662 Adams Street, because Mr. Sullivan did send a complaint to the office. I forwarded to the chairman, and he had me send them the same. It's almost a standard letter that I'm sending out. What I want you guys to think about, currently, there is no filing fee for a fill permit. And I'm spending a lot of time sending out fill permit letters. So I would ask that you guys maybe think about implementing a filing fee for this, because basically I'm working for free at everybody's whim when they're angry with each other.
What would you suggest as a filing fee, Liz?
I don't know, maybe $200?
All right, I'll make the motion.
Well, I don't, can we do that?
It would require a filing fee.
We got to put it on the next agenda, but I wanted to make you guys aware that, you know, what was once a once in a blue moon thing is now almost every other week. I know it's not that, it just feels like that. But I'm doing it quite often. And
I think $200 is a lot unless we have to get the engineers involved.
100, split the difference, $100.
Hey, you know what? It's just gonna end up in the general fund anyhow.
No, that's exactly where it's going.
Yeah.
Because there's no engineering fee. The engineering fees are separate.
Right.
Well, through
But that's where the theology comes out of, my friends. Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, through the chair, could we put
So
that
I
on?
mean, at least the town should be compensated for work that I'm doing. You know what I mean?
A lot of fill issues, so that seems entirely appropriate.
What I mean, and nobody had to pay a thing, and I have to mail out the letters. I have to type all the stuff. So it's more than just sending them a letter and sending them an application. Once the file permit is received, I have to mail letters to the abutters, and you know, it's a lot of work. It's not hard work, but it's time consuming. So all I'm saying is we should be charging something.
Do they provide for your mailing to the abutters? Like
They provide the envelope.
Yeah, and the addresses
With
and
postage.
the addressed envelopes
Yep.
and all.
But I'm typing the ad, I'm making the copies, and I'm stuffing the envelopes. Again, not difficult work, but time consuming. Yep. So I'll put it on the next agenda. I just wanted to put the bug in everybody's ear that currently I'm working for free on the filing permits, on the fill permits right now.
I don't think we'll worry about continuing that when we vote.
I'm not quite sure what that is sometimes.
We won't be continuing that for 3 months.
No.
Anyway,
No.
we'll have that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to bring before the meeting tonight?
I got nothing.
Great seeing you all.
This
Happy
was my
New Year
first
to everyone.
public
Stay
hearing.
safe and well. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Seconded.
Happy New Year.
Second.
Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
Night.